Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock on the dot. We're going to go ahead and start the budget committee meeting. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry, roll call.
I will, thank you. Commissioner Dumbrell.
Present.
Commissioner Page.
Here.
Commissioner Hagedorn. Here. Commissioner McCall Wallace. Here. Commissioner Caitlin is online and will be joining us shortly. Commissioner Reddy. Here. Chair Barron.
Present.
Lisa Fry. Here. David Hatcher.
Here.
Vice Chair Hurst. Here. Tom Murdoch. And our new member, Mark Forge.
Here.
And Larry Gonzalez is joining us via
Here.
Zoom.
Here.
Thank you. Get everybody.
Got it.
It's been a while since we had a full budget committee.
Full house. Perfect. So tonight we have a pretty big stack to get through. The plan for tonight as far as how the meeting's gonna go. So I've already sat in one 5-hour meeting today. This will be my second one for the night. But one thing I just noticed from that meeting today was a lot of the time, the questions that were getting asked were answered if we just sat back for a couple more seconds and let the presenter continue on. So what I'd like for tonight's meeting is Bill's gonna be leading a lot of the presentation as far as the budget goes. But we're gonna have it very structured in the place that we're not going to ask questions until it gets to the end of a slide. And then we will allow essentially all the questions that we want to be asked at that point, and then we'll move on to the next slide. That way, we're just keeping things structured, moving forward, and we're not here until 10 o'clock. I'm hoping that we're aiming for 8:30 is the kind of the goal for the night. With that, the only other reminder I have for everyone is, well, there are elected officials in the room. There's also volunteers in the room, and this is not a policy-making body. This is a budget committee, and so for the policy things, I will leave the politics up to the politicians. And we will be discussing the budget committee and the budget tonight. So I'm looking forward to it. Nothing like 110 plus pages to get through. And with that, Mr. Reed, are you ready?
I am ready. Thank you, everybody. Just to let you know, of course, we have our police chief, Nick Jones, library director, Robin Doty, and Dustin Lucanati with Director of Public Works. They put a ton of time and effort into a number of different sections, some obvious by department, some not so obvious. So I don't anticipate a bunch of really detailed questions. We might get some, but here is a resource, but I'm not gonna throw them a bunch of presentation responsibility either. Because we just kind of want to walk through things and then elaborate on anything if we did have questions after taking a look at the budget. So without further ado, what I want to do is the first budget on the schedule is actually the Urban Renewal Agency, and we have it on the agenda to be able to walk through that from 6 o'clock to 6:45. I don't anticipate it taking that much time. However, given that the Urban Renewal Agency and urban renewal law and everything under that umbrella has yet to be a detailed work session for city council, given that we have this time and we might get some questions kind of more programmatically, that sort of thing about urban renewal. And that's okay. So we have the time to kind of talk through these things in a way that we wouldn't be able to with the city budget that is extensive. So I just want to throw that out there that if there are no bad questions about urban renewal and there's some time to answer them in addition to just going through the numbers. So let's go through there. Thank you. This is just kind of the list of everybody. It's on the okay. Thank you, everybody who is on the budget committee, elected officials. Oh, I didn't update the vacancies. Sorry. On this table. Mark Forge is our new city council appointed budget committee member, and I didn't update this table, I just realized. So, but thank you, and your term is till December 31st, 2029, but you knew that. So thank you, everybody, for being here and taking on the responsibility. At the previous budget, I'm just going to go through a few slides somewhat quickly, just kind of going back over. ORS chapter 294 lays out in excruciating detail all the things that a public agency budget, a city budget in its process needs to do. It's highly prescriptive. we do our best to follow all of that. If we're imperfect in it, you know, we can back up or do something, but by and large, everything is kind of set up to be that way. You've already had one meeting, May 8th. That was just a kind of introductions, elect officers, and then kind of go over the process and kind of responsibilities and things budget committees are supposed to do and be prepared to do.
It was May 1st.
We have, I'm sorry,
First meeting was May 1st. You released the.
was it? Oh, sorry, yes, I released the budget on the 8th. Thank you, Chair. We had our first meeting on May 1st. So we have 3 right now scheduled meetings. This first meeting to go over the released budget, we have it on the calendar for May 22nd, 1 week from tonight, the second meeting. That meeting will be the formal public comment meeting. Will be kind of given how you all laid out the process for the budget. And then, as needed, we also have it on the calendar. We have May 29th, which would be 2 weeks from tonight, to go over any additional revisions, response to public comments, that sort of thing. But before, in June, the city budget needs to be adopted by city council. But before it reaches them, the budget in some form has to be reviewed and approved by this body to send it to city council. So we're kind of working on that track. And then by June 30th, it's adopted along with some other resolutions, including a new fee schedule to make it all possible. And by July 15th, all of this gets sent over to the county clerk and it gets sent on to the state. So that's generally speaking the process. Okay. Quick reminder, we do a biennial expenditure control budgeting, which basically means departments have the ability to save money over the course of the budgeting period and accumulate those funds over time. Some departments have a better ability to do that than others. Some departments take very full advantage of that, have done a very good job if they're able to. Other departments, it's kind of tough, kind of how they're set up. So anyway, it does enable that to happen, earn interest on savings over time. And there's a bit more kind of control in terms of managing the department budgets and flexibility. It's not a matter of hitting every line item expense exactly according to budget. If you go over budget understandably on one line item, you make it up by saving even more on another, just so long as you hit the main expenditure category budgets during the budget cycle. We're biennial. This will be our 3rd biennial budget for the city. The first one was 21-23. Kind of went over all that. I didn't update. It shouldn't say proposed. Council adopted or recognized their new city council adopted, recognized their new, declared their new council budget priorities last Monday, a week from this past Monday. It was just recently. But the bottom line here is we kind of went over them and we'll talk about them a bit in terms of how each one of these priorities has focused or has shaped the budget, and pretty much all of them, but some certainly more than others because there's a little more specificity about some of the priorities. So, but we'll talk more about that as we go along. So we'll start with North Plains proposed urban renewal budget. The budget that you have in front of you for urban renewal, it's about 4 or 5 pages. It's a pretty specific law, kind of confined what the urban renewal agency can do. But the 4 city council budgeting priorities really factored into, you know, kind of substantiating and doing some things or planning some projects and how the emphasis will shift for urban renewal, the urban renewal agency over the next couple of years. But priority 2, increasing investment in infrastructure. Priority 3, proactively planning, you know, strategic documents and supporting fiscally responsible growth. Priority 4, implementing effective economic development programs with a focus on smaller businesses and downtown and commercial areas. I mean, downtown and commercial areas, Glencoe, and then you got all of Glencoe, and then in town, and then to commercial West Union, and then Commercial Street all the way through downtown. That's the urban renewal district for the most part, our 2 primary commercial corridors. So priority 4 really lines up with the urban renewal agency as it's geographically defined. And then increasing community involvement and access through improved communication and connectivity. So we'll get to that. As far as major projects or emphases of the Urban Renewal Agency, the biggest immediate thing that we need to get going on, and we could begin before the fiscal, we can start the process before July 1st, but one of the first big things we need to do is retain a specific consultant, and there's really only one of them statewide that does this, and complete a what amounts to what's called a minor amendment. It's not a substantial amendment, it's a minor amendment, so the process is kind of limited and not as expensive. But we simply need to amend the plan to enable the district to extend past December 31st, 2026 in terms of being able to spend money on projects and do more things that maybe we haven't yet been able to do. The big thing in there, though, that move would enable would be spending money on a substantial amendment that would update the plan overall. It was passed in 2026 and effective starting, it was passed in 2006, the Urban Renewal Plan, and it began acting, collecting a little bit of revenue. It's grown over time, but at the very beginning, very little revenue, increment revenue, in 2007. So a lot has been done by this district over time. The conditions have changed. A lot has been built and developed in the district. A lot of things have changed. But the plan needs to be updated so that we can consider new project lists, including all the projects that are in the new downtown improvement plan that was passed a couple of years ago. That was adopted, but the urban renewal plan's kind of been lagging on being updated to bring all those projects in, as well as identify other new projects on Glencoe that we haven't even, we haven't delved into in detail because we don't have a Glencoe plan. We have a downtown commercial street plan. So all that needs to be brought in, updated in a plan. We should consider, we'll need to consider, or it's a good idea to consider amending the boundary. An urban renewal agency can be up to 25% of, no more than 25% of a city's taxable assessed value total, and it can be no more than 25% of a city's geography, square mileage. And the city has grown geographically and in taxable assessed value a bunch over the last 20 years. And so the district legitimately can be amended in terms of its size, not just get bigger, but cut some things out and return them to paying property taxes to us in the general fund and to our partner agencies like Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, that sort of thing, as well as bring in some new areas that might have properties that need help, that sort of thing. So we'll get that, and then with a substantial amendment and updating the plan, there is a sizable public outreach component, a vision for the district, prioritizing of projects, hearing from the public about what we need. We did a lot of that with the downtown plan. We'd implement a lot of that. So we could probably focus a heck of a lot more on Glencoe and really kind of what the public's vision is for that corridor, because we spent a lot of good effort in updating a good plan for Commercial Street. So we would probably focus more on Glencoe, not exclude downtown from new plan vision and outreach, but we'd probably focus a little more on the Glencoe corridor component because we just weren't able to with the scope of the downtown plan. Advancing. Let's see, Glencoe Opportunity Area, there's budget there's kind of a budget and process involved regarding the property. We will find out by end of June about either a federal or a state funding grant to take care of the brownfield remediation issue. But this budget doesn't assume those funds, but it does assume the process and expenses moving forward after that. So if we get the money, we can amend the budget, but right now it doesn't include that, grant win from either one. Already mentioned folding in the downtown plan project. So the bullet points over on the right are just kind of a restatement of everything I just kind of went through, but it's kind of one consolidated slide. And the bottom line is that the budget really doesn't look dramatically different from the prior millennium budget, or excuse me, biennial budget, because we did a few different projects, but there was actually quite a bit that we didn't do, particularly the Glencoe Opportunity Area. So that budget is in this proposed budget. A lot of that activity and expenses moved forward to this year. There are a few new things. Number one, We've heard from businesses about the need for better signage and wayfinding, particularly on Glencoe, to give some more exposure and promotion of some of the new businesses even that have moved in some of them as a result of the URA's tenant improvement program for new food service. But we are finding that businesses are moving here. There's kind of that initial excitement and then, business ebbs. And we're hearing organization as a new business district, perhaps business association, as well as some signage that the URA could fund and help with to kind of wayfind to get people to businesses, particularly on Glencoe. That doesn't mean we couldn't also improve things or change things in downtown on commercial, but Glencoe in particular doesn't really have much of anything in a consolidated manner. So that's also in the budget, in this proposed budget. We do have some money in here, about $500,000 for another or more real property purchase. Just the other day, I heard about a key piece of property in the downtown area that, to be perfectly honest, is interesting enough and would be useful enough that if it does firm up in terms of something that could happen, I'll bring that to council, the URA board, and discuss what the potential is. It's not a big piece of property, but it's kind of a key one in terms of letting the city be successful with some of a few different specific projects in the downtown plan. So it's intriguing. But anyway, we'll that's something that we get to. So there's budget in here as well for that. We will continue to have debt service on this, for the URA for another 8 on the note that we have for another 6 years, I do believe, 6 or 7 years. I can look up the debt schedule on that, but we've budgeted 2 years worth of debt service on the URA's debt obligation. But by and large, those are kind of the highlights of the Urban Renewal Agency. The scope of what it can do is it's a powerful tool, but the range of what it can do, what an urban renewal agency can do and can't do is pretty well defined and narrow. So it's not a gigantic budget. And the nice thing is that with council as the URA board going through some of these foundational plan updates and extending the sunset date, council can really kind of get their hands into, moving the URA into its next chapter in a very active way. So this budget was proposed to kind of enable moving things forward as well. At that, I think that's kind of about it. Nancy? No, that's it. It's just kind of the regular city budget after that. Any questions or clarifications or anything I can help with on that?
This is Larry. You know I was going to ask a question, right? The part about the amendment for being able to add to the boundary or reduce the boundary, in terms of what properties are included in this urban renewal district area. Is that the city decides, or do individual property owners, can they put in their preference of whether they want their property included or not?
Great question, Commissioner Gonzalez. The property owners get input into whether or not, say into whether or not they get brought in. Honestly, before being at the city of North Plains, I worked on quite a few different urban renewal district feasibility studies and plans. And one thing that we like to communicate to property owners is, you won't see any change on your tax bill being added to the urban renewal district. You won't notice much of a difference in anything. What you will notice is that at some point in time, your neighbor or a property across the street might see some sort of investment, where you might see the city paying for, sidewalks or some kind of public improvement to help the area, help properties be more attractive to develop or infill, that sort of thing, if they're missing some key infrastructure that triggers, more of that activity. But being in an urban renewal district doesn't affect anybody's tax bill. It just affects what public agencies get property tax revenue that property owner pays. It gets the growth in the growth in the taxable assessed value of a property after it's been added into an urban renewal district. The growth in value after the district has added it is called increment. That increase, you know, there's a base value, the district is added, and then over time, its property value grows. That growth above the base, the frozen base, is called increment. And instead of all that revenue being split by the school district and TVFNR and all the different, the county and all the different agencies that have a tax rate, all of that revenue on that growth in value goes into the city's urban renewal agency, and that's called increment. But the property owner sees they don't pay any more taxes or different taxes. It's just the county distributes the revenues differently, is how that works. But they do get a say in what happens, specifically.
All right, thank you.
Any other?
Just a brief question. You said transportation, is clarifying, you're referring to the urban renewal agency plan, section 5, the transportation section there.
Yes.
Okay, that's all. I
Yes.
said.
Well, yes, but, you know, there is provision in the plan to do kind of various, you know, kind of redevelopment projects.
Mhm.
And that can sometimes include off-site transportation to make it happen, or, so under that umbrella, that some of that can be done too, so. But the nice thing about updating the plan is we can be more specific about those things.
Any other questions? We fine.
I do have a question about the Glencoe Opportunity Area. You can go back a slide or two, you had some there.
Yep.
Okay, property sale, is that the city going to sell it?
Yes,
Is that what that's saying to me?
yes, it
Okay.
is.
All right, to the developer who is interested.
Yeah, the city would sell the property at some price
Right.
to the developer business who would locate, who would build the project.
Right,
And the city would be out of the real estate business for
Correct.
that property.
well, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, and then it all goes on the tax rolls.
Right.
If the URA owned it, there'd be no revenue.
Okay, and is it still the same developer?
Probably not.
Okay, the current developer is looking to back out.
Yeah, the current developer is basically just backed away to watch
Mhm.
whether or not the city, what kind of funding comes through on the brownfields issue.
Mhm.
But they've moved on to a bunch of other projects since, so I think by the time we figure out or find out what kind of funds we can get for the brownfield issue, it will probably be in our best interest to do another RFQ and kind of see who might be interested
Okay.
besides them.
And how much money has that developer invested in that property?
My understanding is that on all the planning work that they did, $500,000 to $600,000 of their own money.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Keep rolling.
Yeah, well, that's the end of the urban renewal agency, so unless you wanna, I mean, we told the public, we've scheduled with the
Yep.
public 6:45.
We have. to-
So. I don't know if you wanna move, or if you wanna pause, or talk more about urban renewal, or just use the time to do whatever you like. But we can, however you wanna handle that.
If we told the public 6:45, good council member in this room always had the same, think of those that are not in the room. If we told them 6:45, and that's what we need to hold to. So 6:45 it is, I guess at this point, do we just adjourn until then?
Commissioner Pride.
Oh, I can ask another
Yeah.
question. So since we have a little bit of time, can you remind me? If we renew the URA,
Mhm.
or what is the process to get alignment with? The organizations that would have received the property tax? Like Halton Deli, et cetera.
So we basically later in the process, once we figured out, are we changing the boundary or not? What the impact that would be on, how many properties would how property tax gets distributed. How would that potentially change with kind of a firm new boundary if we change it? Then we go and we visit with them and we basically just kind of update the proposal to continue to have the urban renewal agency. Show them what the projects are that's worth their while to wait on receiving property tax on it. And then, you know, get their okay to extend. That shouldn't be a problem if our plan is to continue to focus on, well, I mean, it's state law, but if our plan is clear that we're doing mostly either facilitating private development, private investment, taxable assessment growth, or if the public projects, the streets or sidewalks or upgrading water pipe or whatever's needed. If those projects are specifically to facilitate the ability for properties to better develop, if not but for those public improvements. What we don't want to do is do an updated plan that shows we're using the URA to build a brand new. Well, let's put it this way, there's a city out there that started a firestorm that continues to this day by building a brand new city hall with urban renewal dollars. And it got a certain fire district very upset about that. And we've had state law passed that over time, as a result of the public agency coalition of those agencies that really don't like cities using URA strictly as a new capital improvement program. So we have to be very careful about that.
Can I have you go back another slide? Maybe one more. Well, it said, I think it's the first line there. Would accomplish sunset date extension past 2027, but the sunset date is 2026. So
Yeah.
I'm confused by that
It-
language.
To be technically accurate, it would say past the end of 2026. So
Okay.
the extension to begin in 2027. So it isn't very well worded there.
Okay, just clarification. Thank you.
I have one more question, Bill. This is Larry. I see, the signage for, for Glencoe and, driving business to commercial in Glencoe. I'm wondering, since business, both, industrial and commercial businesses are so important to North Plains' future, are we doing enough, like through the Economic Development Committee and other ways that the city can really focus on the issues of local businesses and what will keep them and attract new ones? So we're kind of attacking this problem holistically rather than, a sign, which seems tactical to me.
No, that's a great question. Councilor Gonzalez, Commissioner Gonzalez, I'm actually going to let the vice chair of the Economic Development Commission update you on what they're doing on that topic right there.
Vice chair.
You're vice chair of the EDC.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Touche. All right, let me put that hat on. So yeah, just a little background on we're kind of shifting gears here a little bit. What the Economic Development Commission's been focused on, we actually just talked about this in the last commission meeting, was opportunities. We had some folks come in, remind me.
Dave Vanderheim.
Dave Vanderheim,
And then,
I'm terrible with names.
I'm sorry, Lawrence Rivera.
Yep.
Who owns Boro Burger and helped develop the food cart pod in downtown Hillsborough, Or your contractor,
And then the city's contractor, marketing, communications.
Oh, trees.
Therese.
Oh, yes, it's Reeves.
So we had Dave, who is the developer of the new commercial buildings, come in and kind of talk to us a little bit about what he's hearing from the new tenants over in the new properties that have been built and kind of what the struggles are of the new businesses that have gone in place. So he shared a little bit of that information with the Economic Development Commission. The biggest thing that we're hearing is just foot traffic. Foot traffic and knowing that those businesses are there. And so as we met as an Economic Development Commission, we also had Therese, who's the city's contract communication specialist. So her area of expertise is making sure that information is getting out to the public, that we're marketing the new businesses, opportunities for businesses to come in. And so the last commission meeting, we really just kind of dove into what are the opportunities we have to highlight the existing businesses. And that was the biggest focus of the last meeting. And through that, one of the items that came up, and it's already made its way into the RA, is signage. A lot of people don't know that those businesses are there. They're kind of back from Glencoe, behind other buildings. You got Taco Bell kind of blocking some of this locally owned businesses, and they don't know that, like, you know, Capillo's there. And so one of the challenges that was presented was signage wasn't available at the time. There were some code issues. And so the Economic Development Commission will take those concerns to our wonderful city council and say, hey, you guys are the ones that control code. Here's what we're hearing from the business community is that's a challenge right now, is they need signage. They need the ability for people passing down Glencoe to know that Capillo's there, that the other places, the axe throwing businesses there, all of those things. But in order to do that, the Economic Development Commission is really an advising body to the council. So we hear the concerns, we brainstorm ideas, and then we do have a work session planned. I think it's for June or July. June. It's a joint session with the City Council and Economic Development Commission to discuss some of the projects that have been worked on for the last year, some of the challenges that we're hearing, and then bringing those recommendations to City Council to then look for ways to update policy codes, all of the above. And so that's kind of the work. Gives you a little bit of background as far as what's going on that front. And then there's also an effort to hear from the business community as well. So we have a survey going out asking kind of what some of the challenges are from our existing businesses that are in town. What attracted them to North Plains in the first place? How can we get some more of those businesses to come out here? And so, yeah, we have twofold looking at just hearing from the business community. We're also have a listening tour planned where after we do the survey, the boots on the ground begins. And so that's going to be an effort to go out and actually meet with the business owners and meet with them face to face and kind of hear what those challenges are. With, again, the intent of we are advising body, we bring that information back, we prepare it in a report, and we bring it to council and say, here's what we're hearing, here's some of the challenges, here's some ideas that would improve the economic state of our city. So that's kind of what we have in the works right now. But then you also have organizations like the Chamber that is also helping kind of get the name out there of the businesses. And so I think the biggest takeaway I had at our last ECDEV meeting was the business community needs to come together to be successful. The biggest takeaway I had was the idea of like a Glencoe Opportunity Business Alliance, where those folks that are on Glencoe Road, that business coming together and then pooling some funds together to even do things like hire an outside marketing agency to come in and start doing campaigns for them, share that information. Yes, Dustin?
I don't know what has been talked about in that particular committee, but there's the ODOT wayfinding signs that a lot, there was kind of
Yeah.
a temporary workaround. But the problem with that
Yep.
is that there's not a lot of right of way, you know, and that's not kind of the place to do that. And so.
You talking about the Highway 26 signs?
Correct, but then we have to have basically the signs, once they're on Glencoe, pointing to where those
Where those are.
businesses are, which it's a great idea, but when we have a lot of people trying to do those signs, we have no space in the right of way to do
Yeah.
that. And so
This
I
is
think
more of
that's-
like, so that has come up in conversation. So the challenge with the ODOT signs is one, like a business like Capillo. They've tried to get on there. The issue is if you don't serve a full meal, you cannot be listed on ODOT sign that says food. Just plain and simple. Again, I think yogurt's a full meal, but apparently that doesn't meet the bold. So that's one of the issues. And then they are running out of space. But what we're thinking about as far as signage is a monument sign in front of the businesses on Glencoe, highlighting what's there. And so that way, people that are driving down, you have a big sign that's just kind of looking you in the face that says, hey, all these businesses are right here. Please come on over and spend some money.
It's just so hard to get there. I mean, it's just, you have to get on a side street and back in, you know, it's just not easy to get to.
Yeah, I think
That's a major problem as well.
those were gonna be things that we can bring to council. Larry, that answer the question?
Turns out, parking lot.
Yes, thank you very
That's-
much. That's good information. Also, if individuals that are here or other, public wants to attend one of the meetings, is that something we could do, or?
Absolutely, yeah, ECDev, we welcome public, I mean, it's exciting when we have people in the room with us, it's a fun group. So yeah, I mean, all of the committees, commissions, this is a public, we want public input. We are volunteers, please come and hang out with us, we're giving up our evenings, and so we'd love it if people that are concerned about the city come and give up their evenings and share ideas and input, so yeah, absolutely. Anyone and everyone is welcome at ECDev.
All right, thank
Do we want to take a recess for 10 minutes and then just come back? Perfect. All right, so we're taking a recess at 6:35, back at 6:45. Yeah. All righty, 6:45, we're back at it, and now into the general budget. They're pulling up
Pulling it all up.
the big one. It's a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll start off at 6:45, so we'll discuss, the city budget. So we have these will be our operating capital, special revenue and internal services fund. So everything else besides the urban renewal, agency. So, but we'll start with the general fund, which includes our 6 departments and 6 services departments. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Oh, procedurally, yeah, you better approve minutes.
Oh, we have minutes?
On that city recorder.
Yeah.
Details. No, thank you.
All right, so before do we have the minutes in the packet?
Sure do, from Wednesday to April 30th.
All right, before we get into it, we need to review and approve the meeting minutes from last meeting. So I will entertain a motion at any point.
So moved.
Perfect, got a first, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes from April, was it 30th meetings? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. All right, now we go back to our regular scheduled program. What page would this be?
Is this a public hearing?
Next
No,
week.
that's next week.
Is that what? Did I?
It's a public meeting and there's
Oh,
nothing,
sorry, yeah.
and there's nothing to.
I
there's
just
not a
misread
script to
that.
read
Okay.
for these.
All right.
anyway, so
I didn't think it was, but
It's open.
No problem. Okay, so general fund summary, the proposed budget for this biennium for the general fund and inclusive of the 6 departments that comprise the general fund is 6.4, just a little under $6.45 million. It's important to note that in supporting operations of the general fund as proposed, the water fund is budgeted to kind of continue its tradition, but more this time. We can talk more about that before long. But the water fund is proposed to continue its tradition of supporting the general fund and its services. Expenditures on services. And we'll talk a bit more about it, but the general fund is budgeted to receive about a little over $1 million annually from the water fund, from water fund revenues to help the general fund departments serve the public and everything that they do. That is an increase from last time somewhat. And the big change there is that, and we'll talk about it, but the budget document gets into it, but you know, the city, the big thing that's been affecting the city and its service provision and growth in revenues and different types of revenues has been Brindle, basically. And then a little bit of industrial development as we've had it, but it's mostly been the build out of Brindle. And before that, Sunset Ridge. And as of the last month, and we talked a little bit about this at the first meeting, Bryn Hill is done paying all of the different fees that are needed for them to get building permits for the rest of the build out of their homes in phases 4 and 5. So we've received all those funds. We expect them to probably apply for reimbursement for some of the public parks they're putting in at their expense. And we expect that there will probably be some credit an application for additional credit on the transportation development tax that they've paid for each of the homes that get a building permit, because there are some public improvements that they've put in on their home with their own money that they can apply for a credit as a result of that. But either way, the city's community development department received a lot of revenue as a result of the growth activity and the land use approval and the design review and all those things. And that is pretty much with Bryn Hill done. After July 1, that faucet is practically speaking turning off. We have a bit of infill residential lots. We have a little bit of industrial land left. Those things we'll see build out of, and we're hearing about some planning for some things on the land that remains. But relatively speaking, with Bryn Hill done, from a revenue perspective for the city on the community development planning side of things, the general fund is no longer seeing that flow of revenue. And so the water fund is back to stepping in a bit more to help support the general fund as a result of that. And that's basically what's going on here when you see the increase. The other, big thing I'll point out, and we'll get into it in terms of expenditures is, different things are going up by different inflation rates. Some things are assumed to go up 3%, some 4%, some have been dictated to us that the cost going up is 7.5% to 8%. I mean, there's a variety of assumptions about different things going up in cost. One notable thing in terms of a policy choice, in terms of expenses going up, is that council had probably the one priority that was unanimous in support when we went through the visioning exercise. Not that any of the priorities had real disagreement about them, but the one that kind of jumped out to everybody more immediately was, public safety investment is important. We've had this mostly same level of service in terms of number of deputies in town for quite a while. Last year, we added 0.25 FTE, bumped it up from 1.75 deputies to 2. That's what we have now, is 2 full-time equivalent deputies in town. But the priority was to enhance, the budget priority was for enhancing service level. So in working with Chief Jones, the incremental step forward is to meaningfully add patrol in town presence overnight sometimes, or later hours or earlier mornings, depending on different times, different parts of the schedule of the week. 1 full FTE added is on top of that. So 4 total FTEs, 3 FTE deputies. The cost of that additional 1 FTE police officer is included in the expense in this budget, to be clear. But as you probably saw in the budget, the cost to pay for that 1 additional FTE to reduce the pressure on the water fund, helping to pay for that as well. I have a proposal in there for a water bill fee, not unlike the transportation utility fee that everybody pays on their monthly water bill. And if the water bill works somewhat like the transportation utility fee monthly, if it works somewhat similarly in terms of how much households pay per month versus different types of businesses paying a different amount, depending on their impact on the service load of the service, that fee, if it's set properly, should adequately cover the cost of 1 more FTE police officer. But it boils down to council seeing the need, adopting the fee, and it being implemented by the city on folks' water bill. So that's a process, but that would be sufficient to take on the additional cost of 1 more FTE.
Any questions? Or any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. The prompt is appreciated. It really is. Yeah.
I did have, sorry.
Go ahead.
Good.
I did have a question about the fee. So we're doing right now with the fee in place, saying it's gonna cover it. are we making any preparations or are we gonna make a preservation? You know, preparations for if we don't get the fee approved.
The fees just administrative and throw it in there, you know, in development.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking, 2 years ago, the voters said they didn't wanna pay for it. Last year, we tried to put a fee on the water bill at the city council, everybody threw a fit about it. So I don't want us to do a bunch of stuff and have it the last minute and fall through. Not that it would or wouldn't, but we haven't heard from the public whether or not everybody wants to pay more.
Sure, it's a great question, so. So with this budget, including that expense of the additional FTE, at least, so with adoption of this budget, it enables the city to take on the cost. But I think it would probably, and council would walk through the process. But we would work towards going through a process with public input whereby we wouldn't take on the expense of that additional FTE unless it came with some sort of fee attached. Because the reality is that if we add the $188,000 a year for one more FTE and we don't find a new revenue source for it to pay for it, public safety jumps over 60% of the general fund's unrestricted revenues. And I don't know that you all would want over 60% of your unrestricted revenues that can go to different departments. So it would be an unfunded mandate if there isn't some sort of fee. But adopting this budget doesn't command us to spend the money, but it does create the capacity for council to do it in the right sequence of events that it works through.
So that's $53 a year per person.
Yeah, the fee would, well, it would be,
And
it
the
would
house
be,
would be even more.
it would be per household, about $5, $5.20. According to some kind of preliminary numbers on it, we
So
would need to come
$60 a
back
year?
with specifics, so $60 a year. $60 a year for enhanced patrol per household.
Commissioner Pittman, you had a question?
Thank you. Bill, my question was regarding the proposed fee on the water bill. Is that something that can be reversed as well by council? Like, let's say 5 years from now, the city comes into a different revenue stream. Is that something that can also be reversed, or would that be allocated potentially to a different fund?
Oh, well, so, great question, Commissioner. Councilman, Commissioner, sorry. So the great thing about doing a fee on the water bill is that it gives council a lot of flexibility about adopting it, changing it, and ending it. And keeping the fee set annually, increasing it if needed to match the cost of whatever it is you're paying for. So the process, so unlike a levy, like, as Commissioner mentioned, Commissioner Tom mentioned, the voters did not approve of the levy as it was constructed and put together a couple of years ago. A levy is great in that if it is passed, it's guaranteed for a 5-year period. You can count on it. Everybody's kind of paying it. If you don't own a very valuable piece of property, then as much as your neighbor with a more expensive house, you're not paying as much for the service, right? So it scales with property value. That's a positive thing. It's not regressive. But the problem is that it's a fixed thing for a 5-year period. Some costs go up 7 to 8% guaranteed. Your property tax levy can't go up more than 3% by state. Your tax bill can't go up by more than 3% by state law. So from the get-go, with a levy, you're already challenged with funding adequately. The fee can be adopted by council. You don't have to go to the voters. You should go through a public process, certainly, to get people's input and willingness and all that. But council simply needs to adopt a resolution. There's no election involved. And then if the city decides, hey, we need a local option levy for some services, council can say, okay, we're done with the fee. We're going to move to this. Because in the end of the day, the property tax is deductible on your federal taxes, whereas paying a water fee is sort of like renting. You're just spending it, it's going away. So it can certainly be viewed as a temporary stopgap or kind of a temporary step towards a more permanent solution, and council can reverse it by resolution.
Okay, thank you.
So how does that work? I think this relates to, Commissioner Tone, what a question. How does that work, in terms of us adopting or recommending a budget? And then does it go into that process then where then council looks at that fee? And I guess, it was a highly rated, was not unanimous from my memory. But definitely highly rated in terms of the need. But we do have 24-hour coverage currently. And so, I guess the question would be, then as we go along, is it just something that we're going to be, we would look at just increasing the fee to add deputies along the way, or, part of full-time?
So,
So we go from $5 now to a couple years down the road, $10.
great question. At the end of the day, that would have, in some way like that, it would have to be structured. It would have to be structured. I mean, what we've experienced is that pretty consistently for the past few years, the same level of service contract with Washington County Sheriff's Office, because they have their own contract negotiations and things that we're not involved in. The annual cost is usually going up 7 to 8, sometimes more % each year. So if you go down the path of a fee on the water bill, yes, you would be looking at some kind of adjustment to keep that fee on the water bill paying for the additional cost. It would have to be done that way. But in terms of initiating this, by passing the budget with these okayed expense numbers, you've set the course for being able to do this, because you have a budget that says you can spend enough to include another FTE, but it doesn't dictate that I go out and renegotiate the contract. Council would have to authorize me to do that. And my recommendation to you all would be to do that only if you have a revenue fee or something in hand that goes with it before you authorize me to talk to Washington County Sheriff's Office. But so this step right here of adopting the budget, just if you adopt this number, or this budget this way with this expense item in it, you're enabling the process to move forward with this total expense number. But it wouldn't be realized until you've authorized me under what circumstances to negotiate a change in the contract.
And if this went forward from this committee, because I know we're getting more into policy and stuff now in terms of conversation. If this went forward from this committee to the council for that policy discussion, and council decided that they, just playing both sides here, didn't want to do that, that then has to come back to the committee because it's a larger amount in a line item change, is that correct?
But this budget includes, in the line item is enough money to pay for the additional FTE on top of. So you would, so this, if council chooses to add the FTE, this budget already makes that okay. There would,
Coming out of the water fund then, or something.
no, this budget also includes the revenue stream from that fee in the revenue projection.
Right.
It's so by adopting the budget as is with these items, you have adopted a revenue stream projection that is included, that fee. But you've also, more importantly, the scrutiny of the budget really is how much you've authorized to be spent. And the budget as is reflects that additional FTE. So by adopting this, you've set the stage from a budget perspective only to enable it to be possible. But you haven't authorized it to happen. The council hasn't until that time comes.
Commissioner Hurst?
I'm not sure that answered the question, okay?
Okay.
The question, I think, is, yes, it enables that to happen. Should the city council decide not to go forward with the fee, does the budget need to be revised before it's approved? I don't think so.
No, I would agree with your instinct, Commissioner Hurst. No, it doesn't.
Right.
It only needs to be adjusted if you decided you wanted to spend even more.
Right,
But if you approve and adopt a budget that has too much money for that line item,
mhm.
you don't have to do anything.
You don't have to go back.
The amendment process is about adding even more.
Okay.
All right, I think
On the website.
that,
Thank you
that's
very
what
much.
I understood your question to be. Okay,
Commissioner Page?
You just don't, exactly, correct. You just don't spend it.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm very confident that at least one city council member hates spending money. So, so how does that work so would you say is if this doesn't get passed, we would not hire the extra FTE, right?
We wouldn't hire correct, we wouldn't hire the FTE and that money would go unspent, basically.
Because it wouldn't.
It's the revenue.
Yeah, revenue wouldn't be there. Well, that's not true. I mean, if the budget authorizes a certain amount of money to be spent, it doesn't tie to any revenue stream legally. The budget pass simply reflects a number that was approved, a total number that was approved to be spent by this body. And then adopted to money.
I just want to clarify, to a comment that from Commissioner McCall, we don't actually have 24-hour coverage, police coverage in the city. So I want to be clear about that. What we have is the ability for the sheriff's office to come in and answer high priority calls, 1 and 2 priority calls,
Right.
not to come and do proactive police work to prevent any crime or to answer even like harassment, minor assault level crimes, that middle level priority. So we don't actually in fact have 24-hour police coverage.
But in an emergency situation,
In the
we have
likelihood
that call,
You are gonna
and
have
we
it.
do have that.
Yes, you'll have a delayed response from the sheriff's office coming here as they came for priority 1 and 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Ready for the next slide?
Yeah, that's the general fund summary and some of the big items in it. So, this is, kind of simply a summary of how the city's unrestricted revenues, general fund revenues, are distributed to each of the different 6 departments. In the budget, I don't have the table in the PowerPoint presentation because it's a little bit in the weeds, but it is in the budget document. That details what all the different unrestricted revenues are. And for the general fund, it's primarily, well, it's mentioned in the slide, but there are 3 differently sized legs of the stool here. 2 of them are sizable and 1 of them is smaller. But when the city receives property tax revenue, all the property tax revenue the city receives, all of the franchise fees we get. So when your phone, your PGE electricity, your gas bill, all those things, if you check your bill, there's a little local franchise fee on it. All that money gets paid into the city's unrestricted revenue category. So that's included. And then we do receive some state shared revenues on a per capita basis. So the state collects marijuana, even though we don't have a marijuana shop here, the state does collect marijuana tax statewide, collects liquor tax statewide, and a few other things. And those revenues also get distributed to us on a per capita basis, and they get pooled into unrestricted revenues as well. That's smaller than the other 2. Property taxes and franchise fees are significantly larger than the others. But those 3 categories of revenues come in, and then and then interest on just general fund reserves. That's a much smaller number, but it's still not insignificant. But that also gets put into the unrestricted revenues. And then when you combine all those revenues together, those categories, they just basically get divvied up, and that's how the different general fund departments get greatly funded, not completely funded, but greatly funded by the general fund. And this is the distribution after going through new city council priorities. As well as the change in revenues coming in, one-time short-term revenues coming in with planning and development winding down. And then where water fund is or isn't needed for support. So there's your breakdown. Public safety is again around 50% of unrestricted general fund revenues. This chart does assume the fee on the water bill. If an FTE is added to 4 total FTEs, and no revenue stream is approved, this total jumps up, the public safety total jumps up to over 60%. So just, so that's what this chart assumes. And then the other thing, I guess, what I would say, and we'll get into it a bit with the library discussion. And I'll save the details for later, and Robin's here to correct me when I'm wrong on some of them. But the Washington County Cooperative Library System is going through a very big change in how it's funding libraries countywide. There are new library, each of the member libraries are gonna have a new boundary, new service area populations, and then new calculations in terms of how each of the member libraries get money from the county directly. In addition to whatever the city puts in on library funding. And because of how we anticipate conservatively, the funding formula will change for the benefit of North Plains. The library's share of unrestricted dollars over the biennium are going down from about a 1/3 amount to just under 24%, because we are expecting to get a fair amount of additional revenue out of the county for the North Plains Library. And that lets revenues that ordinarily would be needed to support the library. The library doesn't need as much local support. And so that frees up funds to help other departments who might need help with operations. But we'll get into the details of that. So that's what's behind that. Any questions on this chart?
One quick question, so this may be for later, but the WCCLS funding, is that gonna change our tax income, or is it gonna be separate?
So all of these changes are contingent upon a planned small but increase to the library levy,
Countywide
the
levy.
countywide levy.
That's what I thought.
It's a few cents.
Okay. That's what I was getting, I was making sure that was the plan.
Yeah, yes. There are some other changes in the pike too that won't affect the city until FY 28, so it's not in this, but that's also part of the process, but that's for a later time.
That's fine.
But yes, there is need for that library levy to pass. But relatively speaking, it's, it's not a gigantic operating levy like some of the other agencies have. So, and they're being very careful about setting and polling and all the work going into it, to maximize chances of success is the bottom line. So we're comfortable conservatively having a budget reflected. But the bottom line is that my own strong recommendation is 1 year from now, reconvene after the election on that particular levy to kind of sit down and, okay, we'll have an IGA with Washington County Cooperative Library System. We don't have that yet. We'll have a new one, and it will reflect all these changes. And then there might need to be some refinements on, because we're being conservative with the changes and the numbers. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Larry with another question, sorry. Now, this spending chart that we see here is partly a reflection of historical data, right? How we've been spending money. Is that correct?
Well, that's certainly part of it. That's correct.
Okay, and then so and I'm making the assumption that we've looked at all these different areas and going, okay, so for this money, this is what we get and what the voters want and what they're willing to, whatever the pain points are, what they're willing to pay for, what they can, they can be a little loose on. And so I'm just thinking, when people look at this, they're going to go, well, if you increase your revenue, are all these numbers as percentage of how money's being spent also going to be reflected as an increase, right? So I don't want people to walk away looking at this chart going, oh, so if you increase the revenue by whatever means, then all these percentages are going to stay the same without additional kind of a relook and reevaluation of what these departments and entities contribute to the community. I'm not sure if I said that right, but
no, thank you. It was a great question, and the answer is by law, you would all have to convene if there was some sort of sizable revenue increase, and decide what to do with that additional unobligated money. The city couldn't just spend all of it according to this chart. You all, as a committee, would have to approve changing the budget to reflect that. I think up to 5%, if revenue went up modestly, no more than 5%, then That's within the discretion of city management to put that money towards whatever is identified to be the most needed according to what's approved. But if it's more than that, yeah, you convene a budget session.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Now this is in some excruciating detail, all the different departments in the general fund. Finance and administration. One thing I had said, when I sent out the information to you all when the budget was released, I just for practical reasons stopped we only did it for one biennium, this current biennium. It was set up so that all the different departments and all the different funds could, according to kind of a proportionate share, pay the finance and administration department for business management and administration and HR and all those different things. But with the establishment of the new fund, we'll talk about later, internal services fund, the buildings and maintenance fund, the scheme of departments receiving money from the general fund and then distributing it here and then redistributing it there and then redistributing it back over here got unnecessarily complicated. So I eliminated that. It doesn't add anything to do it that way. Particularly when the budget evolves for other things. So we're back to the way things have been for quite a while, and that is that finance and administration receives for this biennium proposed 15% of unrestricted revenues. And then the other departments don't have to, figure out a complicated calculation of what they should pay the department. And then there's all this pass-through activity. We're not doing that anymore, or at least I'm proposing we don't do that anymore because it just gets really silly complicated. So 15% is what is proposed of unrestricted revenues for this department. And again, this really kind of just, it's primarily city manager, some city recorder. The library director, Robin Doty, she has been stepping into more and more work in terms of helping with overall city HR issues and helping navigate a path kind of based on her background. So she's a little bit more involved in this department from an administrative standpoint. So there's a little bit of cost for her time that's in this department's budget. And then all of our accounting finance folks. So that's really what this is just the business management and then all the materials and services for it. Insurance and all payroll assistance, audit assistance, financial and accounting assistance, some legal fee, all those different things. But that's what this department is. And so that's how this is structured or proposed to be structured for this budget. So any questions about this department?
Thank you. It was so confusing before. I had trouble following the money.
Well, I mean, when I stepped into this budget and I'm having to create all these new transfers that make more sense, honestly, for
Oh, yeah,
a maintenance fund.
absolutely.
When you add that to all of this, it was, yeah. So, it doesn't add anything to get that much more complicated. And this is a lot more, in a way, transparent, or at least easier math to track. So, and then and honestly, in taking a look at this in the old budget, there were some double counting of expenses. Not that twice as much money was authorized to be spent, but there was just formulas that were double counting the same number because of the pass-throughs. So just to simplify, I cut all that.
Commissioner Payton?
I'm embarrassed to ask this question, but Bill, can you elaborate what the bug connection is on?
The bug connection, that has been, that haunts Dustin's nightmares.
Very expensive.
So, yeah, so the bug connection is a cooperative of agencies who jointly fund and plan internet services for public agencies, and it's contracted primarily with Comcast. And so we're part of the agency membership. And as a result of that, Comcast is the fiber installation and fiber service company that is now completely Completely,
Yes.
completely?
It is, we now have full internet in the new facility and the Kindle service building. It's fully there,
Yeah.
but we still have to shut it off in the old library. or
No, it's shut.
It's, well, no, there's like an extra step they have to do to like,
For verifying, sort of,
well, for us to stop paying, basically.
and the payments.
Correct.
But basically, it's an internet cooperative that's contracted with Comcast primarily is the bottom one.
Broadband Users Group is what it
There you
stands for. Thank you. Or what the acronym is.
Thank you.
I learned something.
My brain was not going there, so
Okay.
thank you.
Not everything needs to be an acronym.
I mean, honestly, they're going through a new strategic plan right now, and because of the budget process, I mean, it doesn't affect us that much, but, you know, I've been tracking it, but there isn't anything. The only thing significant coming out of, actually, on the topic that's coming out of, the new strategic plan is there's the beginnings potentially of a cooperative for IT and cybersecurity with some of the other cities in the county. And it's in the early stages, and I don't know how useful it will be immediately for North Plains. But I am interested in working with Cornelius and the other cities on better understanding how this will be planned. Because if it can be set up through Bug and their expertise, to have a local responsive, internet cybersecurity company that understands public archiving and laws and records and all of that, as well as just the typical stuff that a private company needs for IT and cybersecurity, it would be wonderful like if it could work out that way. So we'll see where that goes, but that would also be Bug when the time comes.
And I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but is that something that later down the road could be kind of like highlight is for Hillsborough for fiber optic city internet, or is it still preliminary?
It's run by the same people, but it's primarily just for providing services to public agencies. It's not a utility that can go out and provide private.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So you have to have an entomologist go to the library and make sure. it's there.
Okay. Okay, we're to public safety. This chart, I wanted to move up here. So this is just kind of a running chart to show, what our public safety contract costs have been on an annual basis and then biennial basis. In this budget, again, the level of service that I'm kind of highlighting here is since 2017, this community has had Washington County Sheriff's Office provide 1 sergeant and 1.75 FTE deputies, despite all the population growth. This past year, July 1, 2024, was the first time that we actually bumped up the FTEs of deputies in the city patrolling. It went from 1.75 to 2, and Washington County Sheriff's Office kind of fronted us a couple months or several weeks on that cost so that we could kind of ramp up to it. But we are now, right, even though this chart, the contract for the full biennium was 1.75, but we did bump it up halfway through. So right now we have 2 deputies, 2 FTE deputies in town patrolling at any particular time, as scheduled. And then 1 sergeant chief. This budget for the 25-27 biennium proposes bumping it up from 2, like we talked about earlier, from 2 FTE patrol officers, from 2 deputies in town, to 3. So the total cost of that as we've structured it, and by the way, the numbers here that you see here, actually the chief covered in the work session a few weeks ago about current level of service and new fiscal year cost, and then options for how the cost of adding an FTE might be approached. These numbers you've actually seen before. The chief was covering a lot of info, so you might not have drilled down at the time, but please do refer back to those work session materials, because he does kind of give some details behind it. But as we've structured the costs here, it's about $180,000 more for the FTE, the way we've structured it. But all 4 FTEs, 3 deputies and 1, to be clear, 1 sergeant, the chief, are in this budget. As expressed here. Any questions about that?
So when we did the work session, Chief talked about, not having the, what's called basically the extra coverage.
Differential.
Thank you, ship dip, or yeah, differential, is that in this or did we leave that out? 'Cause I don't know where that is.
We took differential out.
Okay,
If you look under the overtime support, I think in this chart, it shows you see the bump for the current biennium at 26,000, bumping that up. That's kind of budgeting for that gap, not using differential, but backfilling on an overtime basis. So there's always that wiggle room, you may not need all that, but we budgeted for that to kind of, whereas differentials have prepared upfront costs, we know we're paying it out whether we use it or not. This would be more pay as we need.
thanks.
I understand the differentials are built in 50% onto it, right? So with such a person, I think the math shows that we're better off doing it without the differential.
Without differentials, is
Yeah.
it? Yeah, that's kind of what we were at last week,
Right.
and that's what we did going forward, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on this one? Okay, so here's a total public safety budget summary with all kind of the different items. I won't belabor the point about the 4 FTEs anymore. I did mention it, but this department also does include emergency management. The Kendall Public Services Building is an emergency operations center, and it is capable of 24-hour in-place response to big emergency. So in this budget, that has been included some additional budget for some materials and things to kind of help stock and further the facility along and being an emergency operations center. And we have some budget in here to do some updating, not a complete overhaul, but we do have an emergency operations plan, the city does, but we do need to revisit it. We have different staff with different responsibilities, and some changes with the county emergency management and operations. So there's some updating that's appropriate to the plan, but we're not talking about the expense of a brand new plan, just updating it. So there's a bit of that in here as well. But overwhelmingly, the cost for this department is the public safety services contract with Washington County Sheriff's Office, as we've talked about.
Any question?
Okay. Boards and commissions. The boards and commissions department was established new for the 23-25 biennium, so there's no historical data beyond this year. And basically, the department was set up because, well, we have a city council, and city council has policy expenses. Management of the city involves legal expenses to verify our contract with our planner is acceptable and won't get us into trouble, and advises on this, that, and the other, a lot of technical stuff. But city council establishes policy, makes decisions, and there are different expenses and training and things like that that are kind of that a city council needs, and training and other things that our boards and commissions really need to have. So they're kind of two different animals. So we ended up extracting the boards and commissions department from general government, from finance and administration. And so this department is kind of all the legal expenses and consultants and training and travel, primarily for city council, but the budget in here, there's budget in here for training and conferences a bit for some of our other boards and commissions, because I'll be honest with you, it would be great if our other boards and commissions to take up going to the spring planning conference and doing training, or trying to get a couple city councilors to be able to go to the League of Oregon Cities fall conference or what have you, because there's just a lot of interaction, learning from peers, relationships that you build that benefit ultimately down the road for things like legislation on common causes. I mean, that all happens when you go to these educational and conference events. There's not a ton of budget for it. I mean, there's only so much money the city has, but that's in this department as well. So that's what this budget reflects. The expense for it is mostly personnel. Lori, our city recorder, is overwhelmingly the staff person that, gets that cost for that gets attributed to this department, but not the only one. There's also city manager and some other things. But by and large, that's the gist of this department. And it's proposed to get about 4.5% of general fund unrestricted revenue in that pie chart. It also does get some substantial support from the water fund. This department is pure expense. I mean, we can't charge fees for city council services. It's not like some of these other funds that deliver services that might have some fees or revenue that come with it. This is pure running a city expense, and it doesn't come with fee revenue. So this is one where the water fund has been proposed to help with it. Because there just are no other options to help fund it. So that's the boards and commissions department.
I'll start with the first question. So first I'll comment that I noticed that the budget you've shrunk it, so. But the first question I have is professional services line item 3,300. What's all included in that one?
Professional services,
Because that one has grown by substantial.
It looks like they're flipped. I have the question is the professional services and professional services attorney flipped on the
Oh,
list? That's what
yes,
it looks like.
yeah.
on the detailed expenditure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's detailed.
No, I mean, I have all the detailed expenditures later in the presentation.
sorry.
Just as a resource.
So yeah, it does look like they flipped, is what it is. So I don't know if you just changed what the line item.
It's possible. Let me double check
Okay.
on that one. That's probably what happened.
Is you just flipped?
Hard fund, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't, I mean, honestly, the big changes that might be an error, and I can see if it's flipped, but honestly, the budget for legal services below it's 68,000 for the biennium. That was intentional. The budget and actual realized expenditures for attorney services for boards and commissions has been over the last biennium extraordinarily large because we've had so many big legal issues. And all based on policy, and that's the point of that is an illustration of why boards and commissions was separated from just the boring operation of the city with insurance and HR and all that fun stuff. Policy choices and the legal the legal clarification of them and the appeal of them and all that fun stuff. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. But we just had a lot of expenses this past biennium. We had a supplemental budget, or we had a contingency budget amount added to pay for some of that. But the budget for this department is intentionally bringing down. I'll look into what the number is that goes over 100,000. There might be an error on my part, so I can clarify that. But the attorney services budget is meant to be lower, more on par with past years. Intended.
Yeah. But
So it doesn't, I'm gonna add that, it's showed, it doesn't have the in 21 and 2021 or the 21-23 in here. It just has that, professional services were 55,680 expected for this year, or this biennium, and the next amount is 114,240. And then under the attorney services, the expected amount is 115,302, and being projected forward at 68,000. So please do take a look at that one, because I feel like we haven't. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to cut that in half.
I appreciate the comment and question. What I will say is that I'm going to assume, and I could be wrong, I'll look into it. The biggest likely error you will see in some of the changes in budget from year to year will be embedded in each of these budgets is actually 2 annual budgets that gets collapsed and summed up into a biennial budget. So I'm actually doing 2 different annual budgets with this. Discreetly and then adding it up. Sometimes I will be at an account and I will look at an item, what's projected to be spent at the end, by the end of the current biennium. And I will forget that that's a biennial number. And I will take that number like it's an annual number and inflated by a certain amount for 2 years, and that ends up doubling the number unintentionally. And it happens, so that might be what it is, but I will definitely.
I
review it.
understand, yeah,
Yeah.
there's just doubling professional services and
The-
decreasing attorney services.
Yeah, there isn't anything from a professional services standpoint that was intended for a major budget increase.
Okay.
What,
There's, go ahead, was there a?
what falls under professional services? Because I mean, I understand the attorney and software and IT, but what is,
Yeah.
what is that?
So there's communications consultant, there's any facilitation, visioning, any of those things, strategic planning, kind of your. Any consultant or service provider that kind of comes in and helps with city council decision-making policy for, maybe a specialist that deals with this or that, it's that.
Okay.
That's what it is, and really for the benefit of helping with the decision-making process on something by council is the bottom.
Perfect.
I asked, a couple customers ago, I asked if he had the numbers, he says pretty easy to pull, for the amount of attorney fees we use since the beginning of the year for this council. I don't think $68,000 is gonna be enough. I mean, we are blowing through attorney fees like you wouldn't believe.
I appreciate that comment. I'm happy to bump that fee up. The number was, I will say, the number was landed on, so to your point, this department didn't exist in the 2021-23 budget. It's new to 23-25.
Right.
So what I had to do was go back to the 21-23 budget when it was all embedded in the finance and administration department before it was extracted, and divide, kind of try to figure out how much of that was really kind of policy driven legal services need. But I'm happy, I'm happy to review it. I will. B, I'm happy to bump it up to give some comfort in terms of, that's probably too much of a cut. But what was intended was for it to look like something inflation adjusted, but more like what was being spent annually, biannually before the big UGB activity. When legal services expenses, frankly, up until the past year and a half, the city attorney was rarely at a city council meeting. That's only over the last 18 months. The presence of the attorney at every meeting and travel time is the one big single line item addition to our expense. But there's just been a lot going on a number of issues where legal advice has been valuable. But that's been the issue.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, from my point of view, and I mean, there's consensus, but I think that you've heard what our concerns were to bring that back as a relook at that number.
Okay, happy
Thank
to.
you.
No, very happy to.
Yeah, because I think the point too is, again, we're only approving to spend up to that amount, and so if we
Right.
go over it, we're gonna all have to reconvene anyway, so may as well.
Get something, yeah, no,
Bump it up and save us a meeting.
sure. Yeah, happy to. Any other, so I'm at library, any other questions about boards and commissions? Okay. Thank you. I like to hear I cut too much rather than spent too much. I'll be honest with you, so thank you. Okay, library. So, I think the big thing to say about library is kind of like what we talked about before, and Robin, I don't want to overspeak but I'm happy to kind of cover stuff, and then additional detail, the expert is here. But Washington County Cooperative Library System has been going through a study process that has identified a number of different things, from how uneven funding has been distributed by the county to each of the different member libraries, to how to realize operational efficiencies if certain things weren't done by every single library individually, but there were some consolidation of some things, to how ultimately the point of the county here is Washington County Cooperative Library System, due to some informal, I want to say informal handshake at some point, but not much more formally than that, has been embedded in the county general fund since its inception. And there's always been this understanding that the Washington County General Fund would cover the cost of WCCLS and the money that gets distributed to each of the member libraries. Well, with the county budget in slash and burn mode for the last 5 cycles and no foreseeable end to it, the county has decided to basically work on a process that takes libraries out and creates, I'm not gonna say at this point a library district, but moves in the direction of something with libraries more and more independent of the general fund. I think that's probably an accurate way to express it. So one thing that's coming out of this is that a levy is going to be proposed for the ballot in the fall,
November
in November, this November. And how many cents are they looking at adding to the existing levy?
15,
15 cents. So in the grand, I mean, relative to some of the other levies,
22 cents right now.
yeah, 22. So right now on your tax bill, it's not the smallest, but it's going to be one of the smallest things that you see on your tax bill in terms of the tax rate. At 22 cents, they're proposing increasing it by 15 cents. In the grand scheme of things on your tax, I mean, it's additional tax to pay, but we're not talking a gigantic jump from a gigantic levy you're already paying. The bigger ones like the school district and the county, that sort of thing. So, and they're planning this conservatively, frankly, to maximize its success. And what happens with its approval is a few different things. The first big thing is that the county is going to take a look, the county is going to finalize a new funding formula so that there is equity or fairness or similarity in terms of how each of the libraries are given money by the county from this levy with additional tax rate to it, so that there aren't these gigantic disparities in how each library is receiving money given the population and service area that it already has. The upshot for the North Plains Library is that with this funding formula, whatever our current level of service and how it's being funded, the new formula will calculate how much money we get from the county based on how much we're spending in this upcoming year. And as it stands, if we keep this level of service that we're proposing, we will receive conservatively about twice as much money from the county that we currently are. Right now, in the new fiscal, in FY 26, we've learned that we're looking at about $210,000 from the county as our annual payment, scheduled payment. We get that in 4 chunks over the course of a fiscal year. With the approval of the levy and then an intergovernmental agreement reflecting the changes, conservatively, we're expecting that amount is going to jump from that $210,000 to at least $400,000. And with that in FY 27, with that change, with that increase, we then can, and the strong recommendation here is after that levy passes and we have that IGA in hand with the county, this body reconvenes a year from now to go over the details of it and what the true revenue expectation is from the county. We're conservatively saying 400,000. Chances are that's conservative, but it'll be a sizable change. And what that means is that the library department doesn't have to rely on the general fund as much as it did. And there are revenues by getting this money, this additional money from the county, the split of revenues of general fund unrestricted revenues for other departments can change. So that's what you all should meet about in a year after this all goes through. But right now in this budget, because it's biennial, we're reflecting the assumption that in FY 26 revenue from the county is 210,000. But in FY 27, all of this happens. And the revenue we get from the county is $400,000 in FY 27, the second year of the biennium. And so everything you see here rests on those 2 assumptions. Any questions about that? It's a big change. I will say that one of the things recognized by the process is frankly, no other city has been more committed to having an excellent library with city funds like North Plains has historically. And part of what's being recognized with this process is that while North Plains is fully committed and has kept a strong library, there are other cities, libraries who haven't had to have as much investment by the city there's just been this lopsided incremental changed formula over time. So this standardizes and everybody's treated more fairly, and that's a very good thing to see.
So when that happens, we readdress the costs?
I think, well, that's a great question. I mean, do you think they're gonna be much, the revenue structure is the big thing that changes this biennium?
In this biennium, and then the next biennium, they'll go live with some centralization of services, so the following budget will have some reduction in costs.
Okay.
So it's a two-step, basically a two-step process. So FY 27 in this biennium is the revenue change, but then FY 28, 2 years out, the next biennial budget cycle will be the change to the library's cost. What changes there are will be to the cost structure will be in FY 28, not this biennium cycle. But be prepared. Hopefully, it comes. So the library share of unrestricted general fund revenue, because of it's at the 2-year period and including that bump in revenue, the library share of unrestricted revenue for the biennial period, it's, roughly a third in this current biennium of unrestricted general fund revenues is supporting the library. Because of the change in the second of the 2 years of this proposed biennium budget, the share goes down to 23.5% because of that revenue change. And that reflects a change for the other departments because of that fundamental funding structure change.
I have one thing to add. Is that with this new IGA that we'll be signing along with this new allocation, there will be some language in there holding us to a certain standard of library service, like whereas now it's not so much. So there'll be these this base level of service that we're committing to when we sign that. And so we've moved towards staffing appropriately for that level of service.
Are you projecting that we're gonna spend this amount of money as this is a city plus the extra money, or? So you think the service levels gonna need?
No,
So-
I'm saying that that the transition, I think, will be pretty smooth because of the strategy we've taken with the library staffing. That will be in good shape to not have to make big staffing changes to accomplish the standard we're committing to. There'll be a few things we'll need to enhance, but there'll also be a few things that are gonna be centralized, so I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
The other thing to get in the weeds a little bit, but one of the nice things about the changes that are happening as well is a modification to the service area map for North Plains Public, for the library, and the population within that service area that more accurately reflects what a broad geography we serve. We have a lot of city residents who are paying city taxes as well as the county library tax. And then we have a lot of folks from outside the city who this is their primary library. And the funding formula and the map is going to change so that, probably not dramatically, but it's going to change in a manner that is favorable to funding the city, reflecting that we have a lot of people from outside the city that come and this is their library. But it just happens that city residents are paying more for the same service, and the funding mechanism, the funding formula, its changes with this process are adjusting in a good direction for the city.
Yeah, it'll spread out the cost more widely to our greater service area. Yeah.
Commissioner Bacon.
I just had a quick question. It's my understanding that there'll be some new centralization of that material handling. Not in this biennium, but next one. And I just wanted to understand the significant decrease in materials and services. Because I'm assuming that is not reflective. Right, this biennium, right? So thinking through like utilities, janitor, I'm not seeing that on this.
Do you want to talk about that? This is the first
Yeah.
budget where that's coming up.
Great question. Correct. So with the establishment of the new buildings and grounds maintenance fund, internal services fund, the operating budgets for the service delivery departments in the general fund no longer have those maintenance costs or responsibilities.
Okay, I got
So
it.
now Dustin can look for security contracts for all the buildings citywide, can plan on maintenance for instead of Robin taking care of her stuff at her cost and time and higher cost per unit.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so what you're seeing is those costs pulled out of library and put into the building and grounds maintenance fund.
Thank you.
Michael question. And you'll see a transfer
okay.
out that covers it.
Yeah,
I see.
All right, I have one more library question, and this, I'm just ignorant about this. Are there any capital improvements planned in the next couple of years?
So we do need new carpet. And you know, that's one of the things about the expenditure control budgeting. You can sort of earmark some of those funds for various things. So hoping that we'll be able to have new carpet and paint. But in this biennium, I don't think there's other capital improvements that are expected, although we certainly hope we can continue the plan for a future expansion, because to meet the community's needs. We have pretty minimal amount of square footage per capita for our service area.
More heavily on facilities maintenance at this point, like new siding, gutters, stuff like that.
Okay.
And so that's part of what the transition to the grounds and the buildings and grounds maintenance fund is. It's more, can be more, not capital, but more maintenance.
More ongoing.
Yeah.
Any other question? Go for it.
Is this assumption of the levy going through same, like if it doesn't go through, is it the same, instance of if council doesn't approve the $5 water bill addition? Like,
Generally, I mean, no. It's actually different, and that's a great question. So what ends up happening if the library, so the county has not given us an alternate IGA plan if the levy doesn't pass. If the levy doesn't pass, we don't have a funding plan from the county to transition to a more fair and equitable distribution of funds per library in hand right now. It doesn't exist.
They might still, it just might be underfunded, but they might still change to the new formula and so forth, I would imagine, now that all the data is out there.
Yeah, I guess what's fair to say is that the county has spent a lot of time on Plan A that this reflects, but not nearly as much thought into Plan B if Plan A doesn't happen, not the same amount of planning. So I think for the very same reason after the election, you all convening again to talk about it as a success or not is appropriate.
And we look at our attorney fees as well, see whether they're in line.
We just have to do our best projections and ambiguous circumstances, and we can always make adjustments. But we're trying to plan prudently for what's coming. That's most expected to materialize, I would say. That's just the best we can do. And we'll adjust as needed.
So just to clarify, that's where the supplemental budget idea comes in. And we come back, we revisit, we look at, we make any changes that need to readjust the budget so that we're back in line in the process.
Right, I would just underscore that point. We don't have to nail every single one of these numbers correctly with this adoption. We get to return to this with supplemental budgets to modify it. So that's council's corrective power or, control on everything. So indeed, we don't have to nail this perfectly for a 2-year period. We can review, return, change.
I would imagine that even if the levy doesn't pass, our allocation would go up. Some. Just because of, the process we've gone through.
I would agree with that. I guess I think we'd agree also that it's just they haven't, like, there isn't
There's
stuff on
not really a
paper in the
plan
same,
B.
yeah, there isn't a plan B on paper. That's probably where I would agree that they would go to some new distribution system. It's just they haven't put the same amount of energy into plan B as plan A.
They've added a third round of polling to make sure it passes, or, to like try to. Sure.
Yes.
Anyway.
Okay, Parks and Recreation. So this department, probably in terms of, except for public safety with the additional FTE proposed in the budget. Basically in response to, council budget priorities 6 and 7. So enhancing community services as well as improved communication and connectivity. The Parks and Recreation Department is proposed to get a bump up in unrestricted general fund revenues to 4.7% and a fair amount of water fund support to basically hire a 1 FTE program supervisor. And that person would be responsible for putting together with council policy approval a parks recreation programming plan and then implementing it. And as well as being kind of the internal person at the city that would primarily be involved in city communications. So we rely, strictly speaking, on an external consultant to do all of our communications, social media, newsletter, all that. We would move quite a bit of that in-house to this person, as well as beginning and planning and beginning a recreation program. So they would work in Parks and Rec. It would partly be finance and administration, that the communications part. But we would be able with a person to plan and get off the ground programming. Now, how we would do it, we would plan to do it as cheaply as possible because there's not a lot of budget to throw at. We have to have somebody to do this, but we don't have a ton of money to throw at a bunch of programs, and we don't even kind of have a plan and tested it yet. So what we would probably do, what we would be looking at this person to do is to go out, and part of the outreach and community involvement is to solicit interest and rely on the interest of residents who teach yoga or who have a particular interest in this activity or who coach tennis or pickleball or that sort of thing. And try to have a staff person in Parks and Rec make it possible for those programs to happen, but then coordinate with folks who can be involved in doing those things. And then launch it off the ground and figure out a fee structure so that we can encourage people to do it. And so a lot of work involved in that, but we would have somebody who's actually doing it rather than it constantly being, backburnered for funding or programmatic reasons. So that's the plan for the Parks and Rec Department. And you'll see that there are some cost reductions in the budget, similar thing. Mowing all the parks and right of way that was covered in Parks and Rec Department before. All of that is extracted and put in the buildings and grounds maintenance fund. So that's moved. So the cost here we're focused on parks programming, among other things.
So the first question I have, you said you're looking at adding an FTE, but I don't see that reflected in the budget. It looks like the FTE is the exact same. So if you go into the expenditures, you're looking at 1.2, it's actually a reduction to 1.1.
Right, so great question. So the previous budget for Parks and Rec was pretty much maintenance.
Okay, so you're shifting the
We're shifting that maintenance staff person overseen by Dustin.
Got it.
Over to the Buildings and Maintenance Fund. And then adding the FTE that's
Got it.
programming and communications into so we're making the Parks and Rec Department a programming operations department
Instead of
rather than a
maintenance.
mowing and maintenance department.
Got it. That makes
Is the
sense.
idea.
So, not that we know of parks, but, I think when we had the council budget priorities, public safety was the highest priority, and we're putting a water fee on that one, which has a lot of risk on it. While it would be awesome to do this, why are we putting the higher priority item into the fund one? Cause that doesn't seem like it aligns with where we want to go.
We have taken 3 runs at a fee on the water bill for some sort of parks funding. And the problem at the end of the day, politically, is people say, and feel legitimately, I'm not gonna use that program. Why should I pay for it on my water bill? But everybody benefits from public safety, from that additional patrol. So that's why it was proposed that way. Now, it's a proposal. If you don't, if you don't think that's the best way to go about it, here's the process to discuss it and figure out something better. But that's the idea, is just $5 or $3 to mow and better take care of what we have. That didn't go anywhere. Trying to get a fee on there for programming and maintenance didn't go anywhere. 2 tries at that, I think. So it's hard for folks to want to pay for something that they don't feel they're going to use, whereas everybody knows that they benefit from a patrol officer. Is the idea, is the proposal.
It's really hard to, people say one of things. Until you get the bill. Ah, never mind. All right, we had public safety, we had all this other stuff, so we put this thing out there and it's voted down handily. To try to fix our budget, so it's make it more online, make it more doable, but nobody wanted to pay for it. It's gonna be tough, I mean, as a job, I guess the tough things are doing.
I guess the other answer to the other side of the answer to that question is, with a fee, the big challenge with public safety is that we have more control over the escalation of cost on our parks programming and mowing and that sort of thing. The Washington County Sheriff's Office collective bargaining agreement dictates our costs going up, among other things. And with a water fee, council can escalate that fee to match the cost 1-for-1.
Understood. I think my feedback would be that, the public safety levy, there wasn't. There could have been. It could have been marketed differently, I think. A little bit more on and this is not criticism, this is just an observation as a citizen. I was not actually sitting in this seat, so I'm giving my feedback from the other side.
Sure.
I think more of the total cost of. The total cost of what it would take to put in our own police department versus what the county's saving us would communicate to the voters, because I think that's something that's not well understood unless people have either been in government or been on the law enforcement side. They don't understand the cost of standing up a police department, being court, all this stuff. So that would be my feedback. I mean, I think it's challenging to ask for a fee, and I agree with Councilor Fay, or Commissioner Fay, whatever you are today, sorry. I'm very much of the mind that people need to pay for what they want, but I have a hard time putting a water fee on when the water bills are so high, so that's where I struggle. So I would almost say it's something that we need to seriously consider, the fee versus the levy, but that's just my input.
Commissioner McFall.
Yeah, when I looked at it to the Park and Rec area, I thought that this was, it does enhance parks, it begins parks programming. And, which we've heard a lot in this community, about doing that, and that can benefit everyone from, toddler up kind of thing, or even goes crawling. And then it also, looked at, assisting with with the events, and then also communications, other areas we were looking at too. And so I saw it as a way to sort of enhance and grow that so that it would become sort of self-sustaining in the end. So that as you build parks programs, you can then start building revenue to come in from those. And you can do that sort of thing with that. And that same with the communications, it brings in more people to participate, et cetera. Where the police levy is seeing that the police as a fee as opposed to levy is also in that sort of, here's the service. Now, if you want to maintain and do this service, we can also do it this way down the road as we need to grow it as well. And then, there's that levy option. And, I don't know where we'll be in 2 years as a community in terms of looking at those things. But I think it would be hard to start a program in the parks area with the fee and not be able to kind of move it forward in all of the areas that it's adjusting. So my thought on the two.
Dustin?
I'm a little biased on this, so bear with me on this, but hypothetical situation is that an individual who comes in, I'm kind of taking away from the fees and everything like that, but I'm looking at it from a workforce perspective in that we're trying to use skilled personnel wisely. And I have my hand in a bunch of departments. And so my case, an individual like this would shift someone to help with, the NPEA, a lot of the events that are going around town. We have a lot of coordination with Jesse Mays and trying to get events in here, or trying to get perhaps the gazebos and the different things around town, like to rent them out. And someone like that can deal with that and not have to worry about the maintenance, not have to worry about any of the public works aspects stuff. And also someone who could probably work a little bit more with one of like the Parks and Rec council, or not council, but the board. I strictly deal with a lot of the maintenance and capital projects, but when it comes to a lot of the programs that are necessary, that's not my forte. And I'm willing to pass that on to someone who's a little bit more, has a stronger background in that. And I think that will be a great need for the community and be able to use our skill sets wisely within the city staff.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we're in the proposal to add this headcount, what are we losing?
What are we losing? We haven't got the community development yet.
That's the answer.
It's basically this.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, community development. So community development is single-handedly the biggest change is being proposed plan for the community development department. Again, with Bryn Hill built out and everything that they would be paying in terms of land use approval, design review, all the way up to all the fees they pay us, system development charges, transportation development tax, all the different, fence permit, right of way, access, deposit, so on and so forth. They're paid up for full build out. And so well before July 1, starting the new biennium. And so what we're left with in the city, honestly, is we had a planning manager position. We have a planning manager position that has been the in-house staff person regarding current planning for all the Bryn Hill and other things happening, as well as involved in the UGB process. Kind of being the point planning person on that work, hearings process and regulatory and all that. Both of those things have changed. And the revenue that came in from current planning on the land use approval, land use applications, and on the design review applications, and the fees that we charge when we bring in system development charges and TDT and other things, all of those revenue streams are dried up right now. They're gone. And like any other agency that has gone through a growth boom of short-term one-time revenues, that eventually dry up, it just becomes a situation where you have to staff very differently. And so this budget proposes plans for the planning manager position, unfortunately, to be cut. And then we have an assistant planner position in this department that will be repurposed, still be in community development. There's still FEMA and regulatory compliance there. There's still other things that we have to do and be in compliance with state planning law and what have you. And the occasional land use approval application or land use review will come in, not nearly as much, but will come in. There's still that need. But with the increasing interest in the Urban Renewal Agency to make to kind of work on making the Glencoe corridor and downtown more economically successful with an emphasis on smaller businesses, which, you know, there isn't space for big businesses in either one of those corridors. So the assistant planner position is proposed to be repurposed a bit, not spending quite as much duty and time and their FTE costs so much of this department anymore. Some of it being paid, an increasing amount of it paid for by urban renewal and the renewal agency and what work that person would be doing. So the budget here is cut dramatically, very significantly over the biennium. The budget last time, we're at 1.1 million spent out of a budget of 1.7 million, well, a little over, barely over 1 million. Excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong line item. The total budget for community development this biennium is 1.22 million. And with UGB planning and other things, and legal services on that topic, the total cost is a little over 1.3. This budget proposes a biennium expense, personnel and materials and services, that sort of thing, down to 736,000. We will still have need for a consulting engineer for capital improvement projects, for some design review on things. We will move, we're proposing moving back to a consulting planner model where we don't have an in-house staff person and all expense. With that staff person for current planning, or in UGB, we don't need it anymore. So we would cut back costs by having an on-call planner as needed. And that's what the city did up until 2 years ago, or forever almost. So we're returning to that. And then, so we'll get some planning, land use review, but not a ton. It will be dramatically smaller, and that will be far less consulting expense as a result of that as well. So that's the plan for community development. So the savings from not having the current planner anymore, which also is a higher level staff person and pay schedule than a supervisor level pay schedule. So we're moving from a higher level position in community development being not needed anymore, and the general fund taking on the cost of a lower experience qualification supervisory role in the Parks and Recreation Department primarily. So that's the change.
We're not mentioning names, but the junior person is gonna take over Parks and Rec. And that's gonna also do some of
The junior planning person?
Right.
No, urban renewal. Urban renewal and economic development with urban renewal will be, and then as well as some of the communications for the city, that person has a ton of experience. That person is going to be taking over the city website and some of the social media work as well based on past experience. So they're qualified to do that. But the current assistant planner will be doing more urban renewal, economic development work with urban renewal rather than land use and planning. And
So it's a
then,
new FTE. department. I'm sorry,
yes,
thank you.
yes. So community development loses an FTE, Parks and Rec gains one, and they're completely different people.
okay.
Thank you.
Any
Sorry.
other questions?
I want to step back a minute when we talked about the boards and commissions and the increase in professional services. And I'm assuming that increase is because of the planning.
No, no, they're no, first off, I think it being pointed out as an error is probably accurate. Like I took a biennial number and assumed it was an annual number, and so it's twice as big as it should be. So that's an error strictly on my part.
Okay,
The boards and commissions is really meant to be policy and policy advisory related
Okay, so-
costs, mostly city council.
okay, so if a planner attends a planning commission, that comes out of the community development budget.
Yeah,
Okay,
because there's
thank
staff
you.
support for that.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Any other questions? Any other questions?
This question is, on the heels of last night's meeting, joint work session with planning commission. And talking through, housing needs analysis and kind of a long-term view of what that could look like in different paths. Is there anything, if we go down plan A or plan B, is there anything that you would see us needing to bring back a full-time planner in the next biennium?
My answer generally speaking is no, because that position and that person, the need for an in-house planner was mostly due to all of we got to the, back in planning the 23-25 biennium budget, we got to the point where Bryn Hill was so busy and some other things and UGB and everything else on top of it. But the core of that job is current planning. Land use application review, working with property owners, checking code enforcement on site, that stuff. Current planning, desk planning. Okay, going to the counter and talking with somebody. We won't have that much of that at all. When we do have some of it, we can have a consultant do it. For long range planning, whether it was, thinking about an HNA, maybe looking at amending it, doing whatever. We're not a big enough town where an FTE is needed to do long range planning. That's primarily a consulting thing. If we were a bigger city, maybe, but that's not our size. So what's happened is the current planning is evaporated. And if we need long range planning assistance for amending this or doing that differently, a consultant can help us with that. Probably better. You'd have to have an amazing Swiss Army knife of a planner to do all those different things in a good, and do them well. Our current planning manager is a great current planner, but his background is not long range planning and DLCD and all that as much. So we would just rely on a consultant for those things. Good.
One other follow-up question. I'm also thinking through, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking through a recent planning commission meeting, or actually, I'm sorry, city council meeting where we discussed applying for a grant, a TGM grant, perhaps, to walk through updating code, and we did not receive that grant. Not to say we wouldn't in the future, but for this cycle, we did not. And also knowing that that is, another piece of the pie, right, that we need to address with some urgency. Is that something that we would also then contract out through a consultant?
Yes, so in the instance of DLCD and ODOT TGM grants, sorry for all the acronyms. But in the case of like Transportation Growth and Management grant, like we have now with ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, or with Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD, on purely planning stuff, code updates and that sort of thing. The way those grants work is the grant is that they earmark however much money of ODOT budget, and ODOT spends the money on a consultant that we pick from a pool of qualified consultants. The city of North Plains never sees a dime. What we do is assure that we have the capacity to manage our end of the project, from getting notices mailed out to making sure that the community meeting is properly publicized, to showing up to the, staff meeting, to the project planning. What it boils down to though, is that our assistant planner is more than qualified to be part of that. It's a project management task from the city side. It's a lot of technical work. The consultants do the technical work and the state pays for it. So if there was need for help in managing that sort of thing, a consultant could help us. And that's how the city operated, was when we did get those grants, the city relied on a consulting planner to help us go through that process on our side of things.
Right, and I think my question is really, let's just assume we don't see any form of grants, right, in the next biennium, even 25, or I'm sorry, 27, 29, right? Is that something that can be done in-house and reflective in this budget? Or is that something that we would need to table, code updates essentially by eliminating this planner position?
I don't think we would need to table it. We would just kind of need to plan things out.
Be strategic.
strategic about planning it out, phasing it. It was not frankly my preference to apply for a large zoning development, a large development code grant application while we had this other thing happening at the same time. I did not give the okay for that. So we would not do that again. And we would phase what we do based on our bandwidth and what our consulting planner could help us with is the best answer.
For the consultant planner, how do we manage what they do? The reason I bring this up is it managing just the budget we have, they use it up until it's gone and they figure it out? Because I remember doing planning commission stuff, we had an outside agency help us out with the sign codes like 5 times. I'm sure they did their diligence on like an hourly basis for that, and that probably used up a lot of money.
Yeah.
So how do we manage what they do and how much it costs? Because it could be cheaper, it could cost us more.
So what we do is we're going to be doing this process soon because our planning and engineering contract will be up at the end of this year. And so we actually have to go out. We're working with the city attorney on what the process needs to look like in terms of what how we need to structure a new contract and how we need to get a qualified pool of different firms to get a competitive new bids. But we would scope the services that we expect to need in a standard manner for a year or whatever the term of the contract is. But then if the city decided that it wanted to take on special big planning projects, when we get to that point, we would either have the ability to negotiate a fee for that with the planner, or we go out and get a competitive bids for that specific thing. But it wouldn't just be pile-on expenses.
Right.
The attempt here anyway, the plan here is to go back to the way we did. That for many years, that's how the city did this, so that's basically what we're returning.
So just to clarify on the Council Baker's question then, so are we, for larger projects, are we going fixed bid or T&M?
We, on very few things do we do time and materials,
Okay,
because there's no,
perfect. That's what I was looking.
there's no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I was just making sure.
Yeah, I mean, the only contracts we actively time and materials anything would be legal services with the city attorney. Because goodness knows where things go sometimes.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
I think that takes away some of my concerns about.
There's an element of the city engineer of record contract that is time and materials. But for each thing that the engineer or planner is supposed to be doing, and they bill with a budget and an amount. So the vast majority of what we do is there's a budget and
We're pretty safe.
fixed amount. And then if we bump into something, what happens, then it goes up, and that happens.
I have a question to follow on Commissioner Payton's question. So in council, we have talked about specific codes and specific areas that we're looking to revisit and possibly adjust. Does this in any way limit the ability to do that? I realize we can't necessarily do all the code. We don't have the grant, but are we going to be able to, go in and target those specific areas that we were already looking at?
My answer to that question is, I don't think so, unless you want to be really aggressive about certain things. And then if that's the case, we would bump up the consulting planning budget on a project by project basis.
Or just some specific, like 3 or 4 different code areas? We would need to do that.
Potentially. I mean, the reality is that we aren't going to have much of anything coming in from a land use review, approval, design review process. But we do have budget in here for a consultant to help us with quote unquote long range planning. So adjustments to anything for long range planning. And then there will be budget in there as well for just whatever might come up, but there's not a ton of money. So we would just basically identify how much work is this gonna take or that going to take. But what I will say is that our assistant planner has done a lot of that code review on certain things already and is pretty proficient at it.
So I'm hearing you say both. I'm hearing you say, no, you're gonna have to wait 4 years or more, or I'm hearing you say, yes, this can happen because our in-house person is pretty proficient. We work with our planning commission, we make those adjustments. So which,
I guess the best answer I can give is that it depends on how many things you want to try to accomplish.
okay,
If the assistant planner, it just doesn't have enough bandwidth to take on this, and this, then we would look to the consulting planner to help with it. If this and this are big project, end up being bigger projects, then we would have to work on a budget for that to be paid for.
I think we were looking at some really more specific areas focused in the conversation that we had.
I think most of what you've talked, a development code overhaul, most things that big things the city wants to do, the state should be paying for. I mean, the system is set up so that small cities should be getting grants to do big efforts. And we've had pretty good success. I mean, this development code grant application wasn't successful, but it's been a weird few months from a federal and state funding perspective, and that's part of the issue. But the system is set up so that the state helps smaller cities pay for those things.
I don't think I was talking about doing a bigger
Yeah.
section. I'm talking about a specific area that we want to look at and address, and possibly change. And I know that's come up both in planning commission and at council.
I think I guess my answer is the scale of what's been discussed should mostly be able to be handled by our assistant planner
Okay.
maybe with some advisory from a consulting planner with
Okay.
more experience.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, one more on this. And looking at the breakdown of personnel services, I am a bit confused because it says 0.4 head of 400K. Is that what we're saying? Is that 0.4 head will be 425K?
There is, in there is some, I can check the math on it for you just to be sure. We'll note that and check. But there is a bit of public works director in there, a bit of, city manager in there. The cost of the assistant planner, relatively speaking, is much lower. I'll double check my math on that. There's embedded in all of this is this gigantic spreadsheet where, some employees of the city, strictly speaking, only do one thing. All of our library employees, they're library department. So all their personnel expense goes into the library department. But certain employees that are, like the public works director, you should see the formula for where his salary gets distributed, because he's all over the place. And I'm the second worst behind him, but he's by far the worst. So I'll check the math on it for you, but that's probably what's.
And is it literally 0.4, even if we're talking about 3 different people?
It's a blended, that's why we don't say one employee, we say full-time equivalent, because it can be a blend of different people in there.
But you're saying it's 0.4 enough?
Right, yeah, or it really 0.4 is 425K.
Never know.
Yeah, well, I'll check the spreadsheet that's doing the distribution to make sure that the math is correct there, but that's not just the time of,
The assistant.
Because
So I'm applying for the assistant position.
right. No, I know.
Monday and Tuesday.
I will tell you, there are so many numbers that go into updating for a full proposed budget. There are errors and I will.
Sure, just call
And I'll
it.
check
It
it.
looks a little.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you mentioning that, so we'll check it. But again, the proposal here is for a minority of the assistant planner's time to be doing planning. And to be more focused on urban renewal, and there's overlap, there's plenty of overlap there. I mean, if reviewing the code in ways that help make small business and restaurant and other thing development easier along Glencoe or downtown, there's certainly overlap there with with planning and community development, because those are truly urban renewal agency success serving things that the assistant planner would be doing. But the intent here is for, really the staff time to be spread more between community development and the urban renewal agency, and it paying for what needs to be paid for.
And that part makes sense. I just want.
But I'll check the math on that. The spread, the formula might have an error there. It's certainly possible. Yes.
Streets.
I think, was there a question down the end of the table?
It was exactly what, Commissioner McCall Wallace,
Oh, okay.
had. I just really want to ensure that code updates can happen in some capacity.
Okay.
I think it's a priority of council.
We very much lucked out with who we were able to hire as assistant planner. Roman is a very talented, proficient person. So, that's part of my comfort saying, I think we can handle it.
And our planning commission.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. Good direction and, being the place to bring that work and get it right. But our staff person there is very, very skilled.
So I also wanted to.
This is Larry again. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Larry.
Oh, I'm looking at this community development, more strategically and going, that's, the planner is great. But a holistic view of the city and all the pieces of the city, they work, how they work together. That's wonderful. I would point to the Taco Bell, that development with the other business behind as an item that I would kind of take a look at and learn from, because it seems to me that if that was planned better, that whole, like you see some, shopping centers or some, things, I look at some of the stuff that's going on in Hillsborough and other places where you see all of the stores are integrated and working together to draw traffic to all the stores, not just one store, as a good model. And I think that the Taco Bell thing to me appears as an opportunity missed, because now we're trying to correct a problem that was created by, I don't want to say, if we had foresight of, a little bit of foresight, we may be able to miss that one. I'm not trying to lay blame. I'm just trying to point something out.
No, I appreciate that comment. I guess what I would say, my response in a way is getting back to Chair Barron's comment about the EDC. One idea we talked about, and downtown really needs to do this, to your point, Larry, and that is that the Glencoe corridor businesses need to form a kind of corridor alliance or corridor business group so that they can pool resources and better market and figure out some of these things to their specific constraints and opportunities. One thing I'm not assuming in this community development or URA budget is one thing Rowan will be working on as a priority, whether it's community development or URA, is getting our downtown businesses to finally form a downtown business association. Because the hundreds of thousands of dollars of state money we're not getting in grants because we don't have a downtown association. This man right here drew up bylaws for the entity that doesn't exist because we don't have people stepping up. But Oregon Main Street Association is a pipeline to hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money, but we aren't getting it because we don't have a downtown association. And likewise, corridor business group on Glencoe.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm pointing to, is that, more coordination to look for those kind of opportunities strategically, right? To look at it and go, okay, what we really need is, either Glencoe or downtown, and then we can attract more grant money and others help from the county and state, et cetera.
That's good policy.
Yeah, no, thank you. There's opportunity that we're just not tapping, and you're pointing it out. So thank you. Okay, that's community development.
And one last thing.
Hmm?
What, you know, when I bring these things up is, I'm also asking, what can I do to help? So we can take that offline, but I just want to put that out there.
I have.
We need someone to lead the Downtown Business Association. I mean, the reality is, I'll interject here real quick, because this came up at EDC last time. So we were sitting there brainstorming, talking about, oh, what can the city do? What can the city do? What can the city do? And then our guest for the night stood up and goes, it's not all about the city. Sometimes it's the community needs to come together, the businesses need to come together, and they need to take ownership. So the city can do, like I said, we drew up bylaws. But the issue is, that's the city putting that effort in, the Economic Development Commission putting that effort in, saying, okay, what can we do to help? I can draw up bylaws. And I drew up bylaws and I said, great, here they are. Who's gonna lead this association? And the community, we just don't have people stepping up. And so it's going to take the community to come forward, the business community to come forward. And really, like, the city is here to support, but they can't do everything. It's a small city staff, and also that's just not the reality of how communities run. Communities run when people come together and they work on it as a community. And so we need the community to step up. I'll put a pin in it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We've had-
And also come to EDC.
Yeah.
Commissioner Redding had it.
Oh,
No, I was just gonna say, Bill, this is honestly a wonderful budget and you've really incorporated our priorities in it. And I mean, the few things we've found are really minor, you know, like, I just really want to give you a pat on the back and
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Yeah,
Great work.
it might have sounded weird that we have all these changes in budget priorities and how is that gonna factor into the budget? But thank you for thank you for that, because I really did mean I want to bring you a budget that reflects all this. So I'm glad you feel that way. I really am.
Yeah, thank you. It's wonderful.
rain fun.
Okay. All the fun funds.
The fun funds.
Do we need to pause or anything? I think some of this stuff, everything here is pretty, no revenues being shared. These are kind of independent things moving forward. And once we get to capital funds, it should move really quickly. So do we need to pause or anything?
I'd say let's just power through. Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask before we leave operating funds about audits? Do you
Yes.
have enough money set aside for audits and what our plan is?
Yeah, I think so, and thank you. So Mark did ask a question that I wasn't able to get back to about what's the plan for audits, and so, and so the question about the money. So right now, FY 22 is waiting for final trial balance for the different funds that we're waiting for this process to go through and make sure we had all of our journal entries enabling those final trial balances for 22 and then 23. So all the work has been put in place by the auditors for 22, waiting on these last few steps. And then 23 has been staged to take those audited ending fund balances for 22 and plug into 23. But they've been pulling together all of the estimates of assets and everything for preparing 23 basically. So once 22 is done and out the door, reviewed, you get the audit report on it. 23 has been staged to be finished quickly as a result with beginning fund balances. And then that in short order should get us to 24, but a lot of work's been done, nearly everything on 22. 23 is kind of the only thing that remains once we get the 22 stuff done. But a lot of work's been done on it. So what you see in the expenses is all of that professional services auditing. That's for preparing it. And frankly, some work, so field work on 24 has already been done. There's already been work done on 24. So the contract with Umpqua Valley Financial is 22, 23, and 24, and they've already been doing work on 22 as well. So it's just a matter of dominoes is the bottom. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question. I mean, we are behind. But it's good to ask, and it's one of those things where if something's behind or it's not done, it might look suspicious. The reality is we're just on the verge, and we've been handling the best we can, kind of just given circumstances. So, but yes, 22 is just waiting on this stuff, basically. Anything else about operating funds? Or general fund, I should say. Okay, streets fund. The streets fund basically is the fund that we use to basically take care of maintenance and projects on existing roads, streets, sidewalks, street lighting, that sort of thing. The two big sources of funds are the transportation utility fee, the fee that's on the water bill already. That people pay, I believe it's $5.71 this fiscal year. It'll be in the fee schedule update in June with an inflation adjustment proposed for it. And then, we do get shared, revenues from the state and the county, fuel tax, and then vehicle registration, registrations and renewals. We get a share of that revenue, from the county as well. And, the big things in this proposed budget are we do have some, well, there it is. Dustin is slating a number of projects, primarily Main Street improvements, and the East Hillcrest overlay, and then some planning for some ADA improvements that we need, including around the library annex. A couple of those projects really depend on the state getting, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong direction.
Small city allotment.
Yeah, the city's had really good success with the small city allotment grant program. We apply to the state for usually $250,000 for different projects, and the money is really intended for maintaining, taking care of improvements to existing facilities. Because when we get system development charges or transportation development tax from new growth and development, those revenues, system development charges and TDT can only pay for expansion of our infrastructure. They can't pay for maintenance of what we have existing. We can pay for increasing the size of a pipe or road widening or putting new sidewalks in place sometimes. But we can't use the fees we get from new development to pay for replacement of what we already have unless we're in some way expanding the capacity. So pipe upsizing, the upsize part of it, if we want to replace a 6-inch pipe with an 8-inch pipe, SDCs can pay for those 2 extra inches. They can't pay for full replacement. So the state has a small city allotment grant program to help pay for the replacement and maintenance of things that the other fees can't pay for. We've had great success with it. We're planning on 2 projects that would depend on those grant monies, and we wouldn't be able to do them without grant monies, but those are in the streets fund because it is a streets maintenance and replacement fund. Anything else to add about the streets fund, Dustin, really? Nothing I can think of, but.
I think there's gonna be a big change in the next couple of years, but we can talk about that later, as we run out of SDCs and everything. But yeah, it's basically anything that is gonna be street preservation and maintenance and operations for that. And in the future, I'm trying to get projects designed and kind of stash them away so that I can have shovel-ready projects for whenever I do get grants, that kind of thing. Because I'm anticipating having, kind of a funding shortfall, here within the next couple of years. So I'm being prepared to be able to have projects ready to go. And hopefully, these SCA grants have been pretty successful, but also those grants, the way that they choose the grants has changed over the past couple of years, in which we now have to complete a grant. We have to complete the entire project and receive the funds for the grant before we can apply for a new one. In previous years, you could kind of piggyback and just keep on applying. And that we kind of ran into trouble on 313th with that, and I think it was 313th and Cottage, where like they were kind of overlapping those SCA grants and it was getting a little complicated, but they changed their rules in which we can only apply once we finish. And so that's kind of more important with these future projects that are going to be more for the street preservation maintenance to just kind of be bundled in these little nice little packages. So that's kind of where we're heading in the future. Not so much this budget cycle, but I'm looking for that in the next budget cycle.
So that's the street fund.
That's the street fund.
First, these aren't much more play. No.
So, when we built the bridge over here, we got some money from Janine and Chuck, our representative and our senator. They have a certain amount of budget they have to give out to their areas. I think we got money from them, right? To help build that bridge,
For which bridge?
that bridge that's good over, West Union.
That's the whole
The
school
pedestrian-
district. For the safety.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
Hillsborough School District contributed,
25, I think that's 500, 200.
yeah, and we,
I think Chuck and Janine, they have a fund as well that they give out, and you got it from Janine and Chuck, right? You haven't actually,
I'm not sure of us
have we
receiving.
been, do we,
We, we're,
do we work with those guys?
we work with we do work with our legislators on funding asks, but I'm not sure what, I mean, we might have, but that was before my time.
Right.
Is my answer to that.
So any of these other capital improvements, like ADA accommodations for the library, have we asked for any funding from them? Because they have every year they get to give out, from my understanding.
Yeah,
The senators
I
have
mean, I don't know
$500 and the representatives have 2.5 million.
I mean, my understanding is they don't have funds per se, they just are willing to include certain projects in bills. Oh, thank you, I'm forgetting that. At least that's the way it works now, so, you know, like we'll work with Representative Edwards. Well, we now are able to work with with Representative Edwards now that we have kind of working relationship with the representative. And then Senator Weber, but it's never been expressed to us by any of them that there's a fund that we can just ask for money from. It's more, we have this ask and they work it through a legislative process.
Right, I'll ask Janine. See-
Please do, no,
How
please
did you
do.
do this?
She-
I know you're Hillsborough now, but
The-
tell me how it's done.
The big tragedy of redistricting is that we're no longer in her district.
Right.
Senator Weber is who we got because we know we're no longer in Senator Solomon's district.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna put it out there. But expanding the UGB south of Highway 26 brings us back into Senator Solomon's district. Anyway, that's a fact, that the Highway 26 was turned into the boundary. But either way, Senator Weber from Tillamook, who's outgoing this is her last term. You know, she's been an ally, increasingly an ally, and has been a vocal supporter of us in the legislature the last couple of sessions, but this will be her last term.
And Representative Edwards has communicated she'd be interested in coming talk to Ken soon.
Yeah, no, that's great. Before she was elected, the representative for our district out of Columbia County had legal problems and we couldn't really establish much of a relationship with that person. So Representative Edwards getting elected and being able to be proactive has been wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, wait, sorry, one more before we go. What is the head count in here, the 2.4?
that's the 2.4 head count in streets.
Yes, going from 1.3 to 2.4.
That is, well, we've added staff in public works, basically to kind of do more street maintenance and other related projects.
Okay, so this is another head.
Yeah, we've, with bringing Dustin on and better planning public works, we kind of always had a crew of 3 doing whatever. And Dustin's been a bit more strategic about personnel, and so that's what's reflected is we have kind of more of a dedicated number of FTEs doing streets fun things.
And there's that partial transfer from parks over as well. So
Okay.
it's just a kind of shift.
It's just a shift, okay,
Yeah,
No, that's right.
okay.
that's the next one.
Okay, the water fund. The water fund continues to be the single biggest source of revenue for the city. Except for paying wholesale rates for water from the Joint Water Commission, managed by the city of Hillsborough. So long as we keep our retail water rates that we charge customers here, there is a margin that enables the city to do water projects as well as support the general fund, because general fund resources are limited by the oddly low property tax rate that we have as a result of Measure 50 in 1997, I believe. So the water fund has ended up being more long-term, has been an important supplementary source of revenues for just basic city functions. Big changes I guess the big thing for the water fund, besides increased support for the general fund. Dustin has some sizable projects planned that the water fund is going to take on. We have some seismic resiliency work that needs to be done. Dustin can elaborate on that. There's a water pipe upsize and replacement on Main. And then I'll let Dustin talk about it more as we get the capital funds, but the Jesse Mays Park Perimeter Project has a lot involved, pipe, sidewalk, and then some things along streets that adjoin around Jesse Mays. So Dustin is planning it as one larger project so that we can potentially do a better job with contracting and some other things. But what you see is the Jesse Mays Park Perimeter 309th, 311th project. You'll see that in some capital funds and other funds. That's actually a combination of a bunch of individual little projects, smaller projects, consolidated so that they can kind of be planned a bit better. But the water fund will be involved in aspect of that project here. I mean, anything else, Dustin, from the water fund perspective?
No, I think there's a lot of consolidation of funds. They're kind of spread out everywhere. So I was just trying to consolidate them and make them work better. Just because that's how I've witnessed it over the last couple of years. As far as some of these projects like the Jesse Mays Perimeter, where it's, I think in the past, it was listed, as Bill said, as like 309, 311, Jesse Mays Perimeter, but I'm just kind of bringing all those projects in together because it makes sense to do all that. And so there's a lot of consolidation in there. The other big thing is I'm adding a brand new FTE, and I needed to do that anyway because operationally TBWD helps us out quite a bit, and they are ceasing their regular operational support because they've got a lot of work going on in the limit, the water line, and so they cannot be there, like they cannot guarantee that they're going to help us. So I have to beef up our water side, and with that, I have to hire personnel. There's training that's involved. And there's also special equipment that we do not have that we're relying on TBWD. And so within that process, Javier's are also going to become the DRC and take that over from TBWD. DRC is the direct responsible charge. He's basically in charge of the water system, all the administration and the legal stuff that goes along with that. And so with that, Javier's position is turning more into an administrative position. And so he can't be both in the office and doing all the paperwork and everything and being out in the field. And I've got crews elsewhere doing all sorts of stuff between streets, parks, and everything. I needed someone who is specifically focused and making sure that we're doing preventive maintenance on our water system, because that is the number one priority that we have, is making sure that our water system is good. And so that's a huge focus. And so there's going to be a big training emphasis as well. As far as the seismic and water pump station upgrades that are going to be coming up. We just finished the ASR feasibility study, and to kind of tie in something that was handed on my desk, like the first week that I was here a couple of years ago, we had a plan of arsenic removal system, and Andy just kind of slapped it on my desk. He's like, hey, we got this plan. There was like no other information about that was given to me, but after going through the ASR feasibility study and everything that they did their due diligence, checking in on like our water source down there. I'm gonna be looking into that plan set basically and seeing, is it feasible for us to even, and then what is the cost going to be for us to get that pump station back up and running potentially as a background source with that arsenic, and how much is that gonna cost? Because there's no costs associated with that. So that's gonna be part of that studying that. And of course, if we get that up and running, there's gonna be additional costs and training that would be associated with that. But that would also go with one of the current council's goals of, more independence and everything like that, and see if we can, pull some of that pressure from, using all that JWC wholesale water. Just kind of investigating that more or less. But yeah, that pump station needs a huge upgrade. And I had a lot of comments, from people asking, when is the Oregon Canadian gonna fix up that area down there? It's like, that's actually ours. And so we want to make it a good looking and a good functioning, thing that we were trying to take a lot of care and have a lot of pride in our facilities. And that's something that, I want to show the city is that I'm not gonna have a junkyard, down there anymore, and I've got to beef up security. So that's one of the things I'm really working on in that particular area.
Larry, the question again, sorry. We have those long lines coming, is it down, just down Glencoe, or is it down Jackson School Road too, where we have long lines coming in for water?
I'm sorry, Larry, I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, the long, the water that's coming through, from either from Hillsborough or Washington County, coming to us in those, those large water pipes coming into town.
Yes, we have a 16-inch main coming in down Glencoe, and we are in charge of all of that line as well as the valves. And that particular line is not seismically resilient.
Okay, and then is there one coming down Jackson School Road too, or no?
No, there is no line coming from Jackson School Road from south, from Hillsborough. It's just
Okay.
Glencoe.
Okay, and the reason for my question is, I know, for example, on Jackson School Road, they're putting in a data center along Jackson School Road. So, those are huge water users. And I just want to make sure that, whatever we're getting, we have no control what goes on the other side of 26. I just want to make sure that whatever water we're getting, we're guaranteed that amount of water, because if somewhere along Glencoe, Hillsborough decides to, expand it and put data centers along that road, that we're guaranteed the amount of water that we're contracted for.
We just updated an IGA with JWC, and so we are guaranteed a certain amount according to that IGA. But we're also looking into future water storage with an ASR, an aquifer storage recovery unit. And potentially that's one of the reasons why I'm looking into that, the arsenic removal, to see if we can kind of supplement with all of that. But right now, we're pretty much, our only source of water is that JWC line that comes down Glencoe. I think Bill mentioned to me, I don't know if you could overhear, I think the line that you're thinking about is the sanitary line from Clean Water Services, which is a completely different utility for sanitary services.
Outbound.
It's outbound, yeah. Not to away from this.
Unless we want to recycle, right? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
I remember when Bill and I started, probably within 6 months of each other here, that there were a lot of resources put into trying to use that pump house, over the years since before Blake retired. I mean, it was tested, retested, this and that, so. Yeah, I don't know.
From my understanding, it was just a circulation. It's
was-
staying too long, right?
I thought it was from past,
Well, it's from the arsenic in the soil.
Yeah.
And what, it doesn't get circulated enough. We get a pipes from Northwest Pipe Company. Just trying to find stock right now.
We get it locally over here.
I know exactly where you get it from. Northwest Pipe Company.
Jesse Mace community.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, we'll move to Jesse Mays if there are any other questions. Okay, Jesse Mays, so it will continue to operate it, as a lost leader service. Yeah, Jesse Mays as a rental facility used to be in the Parks and Rec department, and the point isn't to operate this facility for a profit necessarily, it's meant to be a resource for the community, but we charge fees to use the building. But it's not meant to be like a big profit center. But the reality is that the expenses in excess of the revenues was always kind of this weird muddying drag on the Parks and Rec department. So we pulled it out of the Parks and Rec department and made its own enterprise fund for this current biennium was the first time. The big story with Jesse Mays' budget is our prior accountant here at the city came upon this anomaly whereby the city had been unnecessarily sending Oregon Employment Department money as part of paycheck deductions and contributions to Oregon Employment Department. Unnecessarily, and over a number of years, it
Way
accumulated.
before you started.
Way before I, like, this has been going on for years and years and years. And it accumulated to the point of being nearly $61,000. And we found out, this isn't anything that was pulled out of anybody's paycheck over the years. It was just the city overpayment of the city portion of something. So that had accumulated unnecessarily at Oregon Employment Department, and we got it all refunded, and it ended up being almost $61,000.
Thanks.
So we talked to council, and they thought it a good idea to park it in the Jesse Mays Fund. And then between it, in this budget, between it and what we're pretty confident we can get as a grant from the Metropolitan Area Communications Commission, which is the cable franchise countywide. They give grants for public improvements for fiber and communications. Between their grant, between a grant from them and these funds, we've gotten some cost bids on some significant improvements to audio visual system here in this facility. That's the big thing in this budget, is doing that between the funds we recovered from Employment Department and a grant we're assuming will have pretty high success. MAC is the one working with us, with the contractor on the bid. So I mean, they're already invested in this. It's just a matter of matching funds, that sort of thing, to make it happen. As far as the other thing is that the North Plains Community Foundation, or Parks Foundation, is interested in fundraising and contributing to improving the kitchen. And so that's in the plan. I'm not budgeting for them to give us money, or there's no money in here reflected in terms of a fundraising goal. But with that happening at some point, we can discuss that operationally. I'm not budgeting for it specifically. That's their effort. But with an improved kitchen and an improved AV system, we could actually bump rents to use the building, because it's a bit more comparable and competitive to some other facilities that are a choice out there. But right now, because the kitchen has issues, and because our AV system really has issues, we're kind of limited in terms of nobody's going to pay as much for this facility as they might elsewhere that has way better capability. But these improvements would allow us to enhance our revenue stream. I don't know how much yet, but that's part of the plan here with the budget, is we put some investment into this, and then we can revisit what our revenue, our fee structure might be, particularly for out of city. We have our fee structure for Jesse Mays. The highest rents we charge are for non-residents, and then residents pay a reduced rate, and then nonprofits pay a rate that's a percentage of what a resident pays. So we kind of have this three-tiered fee structure, but we could actually bump rents up for starting with non-residents if we had better capability to hold weddings and or whatever events, because our system's better. So that's made possible by what we're budgeting here. Any questions about that?
I think once you do the sidewalk projects as well, it'll be more marketable, because you gotta park on the street or on the dash or something.
I mean, the mark of success here is with the brand new playground and the new covered pavilion. That pavilion we rent out in 2 hour increments. That thing is, we rent that all the time. So just investment in it, having that covered pavilion right next to this brand new playground and pickleball courts has been a phenomenal success. We rent that all the time. That's 2 hour, 2 hour rentals for birthday parties and that sort of thing. So all that's waiting here for this facility are the improvements that we can do that are within reach, because we have these monies and the likelihood of a grant. I can move along if there's more questions. Okay, capital funds. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
The high elevation comment to make, just to reiterate, is Bryn Hill's paid up the last bit of big development in the city, really. Bryn Hill, they're paid up on all the fees, this SDCs. So we are looking at a biennium and moving forward where our capital funds are not replenished with new revenues, really. So we have to plan our projects carefully. There's some things that'll happen, but not like it has been happening. So there is a big slowdown in the revenues that these capital funds receive. The transportation SDC fund, we really have only budgeted for a capital improvement plan update, those really should be done every 5 years. It's been a little over that. So we're budgeting $25,000 for the transportation for the transportation fund portion of a capital improvement plan update. And then once you update your capital improvement plan, you have a bunch of new projects. You got to do an SDC, a system development charge study update, because you need to calculate new SDCs based on all the new projects you've identified in your capital improvements plan. So those two things are really the big two projects that are planned in the transportation SDC fund for now, but at least in this proposed budget. So any questions about that? It's a pretty easy fund. Street fee and lieu fund. We collect a fee in lieu for certain projects that have a disproportionate impact on transportation facility improvement need, usually sidewalks, maybe a turn lane, kind of very specific things. We don't collect a lot of revenue in this fund, and we don't do a ton of projects with this fund. But the new retail development and the Taco Bell have initiated the need for some targeted improvements, specific improvements on Pacific Street. And so we do have budgeted in this fund using those revenues we've been getting on their share of improvements to Pacific Street sidewalks. So that's kind of the limited what's going on with this fund is the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm hoping that makes sense of the fee and lieu, because instead of putting sidewalks and curbs and all the other stuff, you have a sawtooth street. Like on Lennox, you have some houses with a sidewalk that stops.
Yeah.
And comes up sidewalk that stops. And you took a few, oh, this gives me somebody to use it for something else, and now that's gonna be there for. I don't know, I think we should just mandate, if you're gonna develop, you should put, sidewalks in there.
I don't know on that, but.
The feelers are.
I mean,
Sawtooths.
the best idea I have for that is, in some January travel, I noticed that the sidewalks in this part of town were terrible. I nearly twisted my ankle because it was seriously, it was like 3 feet and big trees but what I noticed was that in front of houses that had recently looked nice and sold recently, there must be a property sale fee that goes to sidewalk improvements in front of that house that transacted. So the buyer pays the fee. It's not
In New Orleans.
in New Orleans. Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm not saying we can do that, but I think we have to, if we want to improve sidewalks where they don't even exist in certain neighborhoods in older parts of North Plains, we're gonna have to look at some sort of fee or something. Yeah. We won't, remember the poem to remember regarding these things is, we won't tax you, we won't tax me, we'll tax that guy behind the tree. And you have the person who's not here yet pay. And that's why that sidewalk fund program works there, but anyway. Okay, that's a street fee and lieu fund. That's public finance 101. Tax the person who isn't here, okay? I hate to say it.
Sure, I came from a small city that went through that sort of rural transition into having sidewalks. And so, yes, you'd be like the sidewalk to nowhere.
Yeah.
And then take a walk on the dirt down to the next sidewalk for, 3 houses. And it was a situation where you really had to wait for the sales to happen and the turnover to move that sidewalk in there.
Well,
for the most part.
there's houses that don't have a sidewalk in front of them because they need a fee and lieu, like, oh, we want to pay for this, it's too hardship.
Yeah.
Let me give you $5,000 and call it even, and they give it, the state's like, sure, I can use that money. And then,
But that was how they went about getting it to happen. And then that encouraged some who ended up with I'm the one house that doesn't have one yet, to go, I will go ahead and invest with the city to do this. And they put the one connector in, but it took a while to get it to kind of roll, so to speak.
Transportation bond fund. So a couple of years ago, actually about 3 years ago, we borrowed $6 million. And over the past couple bienniums, we've been doing a bunch of these types of projects where we can't pay, where we have all these different improvements of sidewalks and things in older parts of town that we can't use system development charges or TDT or any other fee charged on new development. We can't use that revenue to build new sidewalks in old parts of town where you're missing, sidewalk of nowhere. So the transportation, so back in 2020, voters approved a local fuel tax on fuel sold at gas stations in the city. And that revenue was used to bond for $6 million to pay for these miscellaneous projects around town that other funds can't pay for. So what we've planned is basically the remaining funds to be drawn down on that are remaining on a bunch of different projects and leaving this bond fund basically to be a debt service fund at the end of this biennium. But we have about 10 different projects here ranging from Main Street pedestrian improvements to a variety of other things, or paying for parts of other projects that other funds are helping with. But we're looking at 10 different projects. You kind of see the list here, but we're looking at basically at the end of this biennium, this fund really just pays for debt service on that bond and being done with these projects. Transportation development tax, back to the fund, back to revenues that have to pay for expansion of facilities. Two main projects that are funded in this one that the county's approved, Main Street improvements. Dustin can drill down into details, but it's getting late, so I don't want to necessarily have to do that if you don't want to. Pacific Street improvements as well, both big projects that are on we have to do, with this fund, we can only do projects that are okay for TDT spending by the county. So we can't just throw this money at everything. It has to be a county approved project. But that's what we have here between, we have money put in here to study Glencoe circulation, as we improve the district, with urban renewal. We do have some money here to kind of continue to study transportation need on the corridor. But the big projects are those two, the Main Street and the Pacific Street projects with TDT funds. The only other thing I guess I would say about this fund, is we weren't sure if we were going to have a local match on any intersection improvements at Glencoe and West Union Commercial, like what has been talked about being a roundabout or not, or whatever it's going to end up being. We did confirm last week, the county said it's a fully MISTIP county transportation funded facility. We will not have to do a local match with TDT, which is a fantastic bit of news for us because then we can do other things. So the county is going to pay for whatever it is, whatever the fully fund, whatever the improvement is at that intersection. We don't know yet, and they're still in feasibility study. We'll find out before long, but we don't have to take any of these funds and contribute. And that's a very nice thing.
I did just sign the charter for that, and it kind of includes that bit of information, making sure, yeah, good. We're good.
Sweet.
Up to how much?
What was that?
Up to how much?
Up to how much? They're still working on the final funds, but I believe the county with the MISTIP is up to, I think, 8 million.
That should be enough, yeah.
But we don't pay any of it.
Because that roundabout's gonna be expensive, you know.
They are doing a study whether or not they're going to do a roundabout.
Oh, we can't do like China lights. I mean,
They're running into issues with the railroad, so they're working on it.
We shall see.
We shall see, yes.
Jury's still out on that. The only other interesting thing about this fund is that the big industrial building has a bankrupt installation plan with installment plan with us, so they'll be paying twice a year over 7 years. At a little over 5% interest. They'll be paying off $1.1 million in TDT assessment, plus about $350,000 in interest over the next 7 years. So that's a positive thing for the TDT fund as well. Parks Capital Fund. The big thing for this fund, again, it's STC driven. We won't be getting a lot of that revenue anymore because our building boom is done. We've budgeted $1 million in here for a variety of potential trail enhancement activities. It might involve real estate purchase. It might involve trail facilities themselves, some combination. The Parks and Rec Board has their work cut out for them to help us map this out. But connecting and finishing off and enhancing the trail system, that's kind of has had a plan all along. It's just been a pause in doing things. That's kind of the big allocation in the budget. This time around for the Parks Capital Fund is for trail improvements within the city. I mean, anything specific on that, Dustin, or?
Unless anybody has questions.
Yeah,
We're almost done here.
yeah, we have some planning involved, but that's the big allocation this time for this biennium is trails enhancement. Water SDC fund. We have a number of big projects regarding pipes replacement and upsizing, the seismic resiliency project Dustin mentioned. But that's kind of the big thing here, really, besides seismic enhancement, for facilities is we have a number of street projects. If we're gonna replace, improve the street while we're digging, upsize the pipe while we're at it. And the system development, the water SDC fund gets to pay for that upsized part, not the replacement of the existing size part. But it gets to be part of the funding mechanism, and that's the big part. That's what this fund is really primarily doing over the next 2 years in this proposed budget.
Every little bit helps. We've got 4-inch lines in town still, then we gotta upgrade those up to 8.
So this gets to help with that. For sure. The Public Works Building, it is substantially done. The only thing left for this fund will be a $50,000 monument sign out on West Union Road. We have designs for it. So we might even pull the trigger on, I mean, we're actually gonna probably do something this before July 1, right? Really?
It's actually, the bid, well, yeah, we have the concept and the bid for it was substantially less than that, so.
Oh, okay. So the budget for this fund does reflect the expectation that it might take longer, and it's $50,000, and authorizing the budget allows that much to be spent on it. Sounds like we won't need it, and it will just go unspent.
Crossing my fingers.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing that should be mentioned is that this fund, we will have to do some supplemental budgets for the transportation SDC fund, water SD fund, and SDC fund and parks capital fund. Because during the course of doing this building, during the Kindle Public Services building, there were design changes that had to happen in the middle of rapidly escalating construction costs, inflation over the past couple of years. Because the design for the garage, among a few other things, had to be modified, particularly for the back capacity for the back truck. So what ended up being an initially budgeted 2 years ago before all of that, $6.8 million project, $5 million, a grant from the state from lottery bond proceeds. We had additional costs that are going to have to be covered by the SDC funds. That's allowed, but that's the difference, and that's what you're seeing in the fund there is overage and having to spend on those change orders with SDC funds.
A 4-letter word right there.
Change order.
Change order.
Oh, yeah. So there's that. Any questions about the Public Works Building fund? It's almost done. Well, the building's done, but we have this. Transportation Impact Fee Fund is a dead fund. By law, we have to report historical spending for 2 budget cycles after the fact. This is the last budget you'll ever see the Transportation Impact Fee Fund on it. So that's just a formality. Okay. The American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA fund, we got nearly $500,000 from the Treasury 3 years ago. And over the course of 2 budget cycles, we went through guidance updates on what we could spend it on. The range of things that we were allowed to spend it on dramatically expanded over the last 3 years. What also changed dramatically over the last 3 years is how we planned, considered, and guaranteed we would spend the money, given that those things we could spend it on expanded. Guidance changes that occur, originally the guidance was that it all had to be spent by December 31st, 2024. But agencies had a hard time spending all the money they were given, and so rules were changed over time. Last May, guidance was changed that made cities obligate the money to be spent that they had, sort of like contracts, like obligated contracts. So you couldn't just budget $200,000 to this or $50,000 to that and draw it down with different things, different spending need. You had to actually obligate it like contracts. So professional services contracts or an employee that would be temporarily hired to do this or that. And so based on the changing guidance for ARPA, we weren't able to spend about $290,000 because of the way the spending rules were changed. And so we're slated now to return that amount of money because of, it was really rule change. It was meant to benefit bigger agencies who had a lot more money to spend and could do a big this or that or hire people. Now, having said that, I just got an email today saying we could amend things, and there are some, honest to God. So we actually have.
So this is gonna get changed. We're gonna
All I am saying is that we do have an employee at the city that their personnel expense cost to the city possibly could be considered an obligated expense that we might get to change and have covered. I'm not saying for sure it can happen. This is just an email this afternoon, I swear to God. Thank you, Treasurer. So we might not have, so what I'm saying is we might not have to return all of it. We might get some personnel expense for one of our employees covered. Anyway, it's true, yeah, we'll see. But the bottom line is that we'll have to return some of the funds based on, but it would only be this employee because we're obligated, we've hired that person, and we're obligated to pay the cost, their salary and benefits.
Can we use it for like contractors, like lawyers?
Not on. No, we can.
Grants are notoriously tricky on a good day, and this ARPA has been very, very complicated and continuously changing, and this changed right when Andy was leaving.
Yeah,
And it just.
yeah, it hurt my heart to do the math that we would have to return money. It really did, because I would love to throw $200,000, this, that, or the other. But the reality is that it was changed to make cities or agencies that got the money sort of like obligated, like a 1-year contract for a service provider or what have you. And the way the relatively small amount of money this city got, I mean, $400,000 is nothing to sneeze at. But the small amount of money and the way we budgeted for it and dedicated it over time based on changing guidance, parsed it up into smaller amounts of money that sort of made it impossible for us to obligate under the new guidelines. But it sounds like maybe there might be an opening on one thing. So I'll get back to you about that when I learn more. But that's just an email today about
So
some
we
changing.
covered back pay for the last 2 years?
I'm sorry?
We covered back pay for the last 2 years?
Potential, I'm gonna see, I'll see.
For 2 years or one?
Well, I don't know. It might be only back to May of last year when the guidance changed. So I'll find it. And if I can, I absolutely will load that in. So I might get to amend the amount of money we've obligated, and it would include that pay.
Okay. Sounds like a win.
Yes.
Really good things with that money that we were able to spend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So here's the building and ground maintenance fund. It's an internal services fund. All of the buildings and facilities, right of way, mowing, maintenance, security contracts, everything, all in there. And all of the departments and funds, operating funds before, as we mentioned before, library and others have had those responsibilities and expenses pulled out. And so we don't have these siloed contracts for all these different buildings and operations. It's all in one place now. There's a transfer payment from the library into this funds. They continue to pay for their facilities. For example, and streets and water do the same thing, and general fund, but we now have this internal services fund where it's all kind of in-house in one place and everything's kind of done in a consolidated manner. So that's what this is. Any questions about that?
Nice to see.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense.
Contracts,
Yeah.
I was gonna say bigger scope on this contract, so better pricing.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and the state actually has a nice, kind of a nice purchasing system where with this setup, we can better utilize it.
Oregon buys.
Oregon buys, yeah.
Sweet.
So, and then the vehicle and equipment reserve fund, this is where every year departments and operating funds just put some money, sock some money away for vehicles or equipment. This is the fund that, for public works and for finance and administration and other, not library, but the rest of them. Drew down funds to help pay for equipment and other things inside the Kendall Public Services Building. There was a supplemental budget back in December to get us over the hump with new furniture and equipment to go in the building. If you were a regular in the old city hall and you saw everything we were using for a while, this city got its money's worth out of its desks. And that's a good thing. But we went ahead, the city had been saving forever for certain things like this one day, and we went ahead and did it, but this was the fund that funded all that. We're contributing less moving forward over the next couple of years because we have new fleet vehicles replacing very old ones that were purchased last year. We have all the new furniture and equipment that have gone into the Kendall Public Services Building. So we don't have need to save up quite as much for brand new fleet and brand new equipment, so we're not contributing quite as much into this fund. We're back to what we used to do a bit more similarly, and we don't have as much, big expenditure planned for this fund either, but that's been what's going on in this fund. And that's it.
But we're not done. We have on our agenda public comment. Lori, was there anything submitted before? Is there anyone online?
Let me expand the window just
Yeah.
to make sure. Well,
That would like to, hey, people online?
Yeah, there's people online.
Any public comment from anyone online? If so, please raise your hand.
Chris, can you remind me, did we decide we would add this?
Yeah. Because we all want to go. But also we want to hear.
This is Larry again. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for a very thorough job with great explanations and good data. And yeah, it's a pleasure when, it's laid out like this and explained well.
Yeah.
Maybe I would be able to raise their hands. We don't know about that. Right?
Oh,
So can we just, are we muting them? Can we unmute? Just so anybody could speak up. If
Yeah,
there's someone,
thank
thank you.
Yeah.
well, it says ask to unmute, so I think they have the ability.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
have the ability to unmute.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking. Thank
Yeah,
you.
the hand, no, that's a great point though. Thank you. The hand function for people at home has not necessarily been working consistently.
Okay.
So that was a good
The
check.
Zoom software. Right?
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll just end before I bang the gavel and we get out of here and get home to our families. Want to just echo, Counselor and Commissioner Redding's comment earlier. I think looking at the priorities and then looking through the budget tonight in detail, you really hit the nail on the head with prioritizing council's priorities and then coming up with a budget that makes sense. And then, yeah, only finding one error, but I'll go home. So with that, it is 9:25, budget meeting. But be productive. I think that's the thing that.